have signed up to speak either on an agenda item or public comments. So I will go ahead and convene the policy board meeting for Monday, May 4th at 2:02 p.m. Just as a reminder, we are meeting by the temporarily modified Open Meetings Act and participating remotely based on the governor's disaster declaration enacted March 13th, 2020. I will quickly call the roll. I think everybody's here, but if you'll just quickly acknowledge that you're on the call. Ann Kitchen.
I'm here.
Steve Adler.
I'm here. I needed to unmute.
Okay. Allison Alter.
I'm here.
Clara Beckett. Commissioner Beckett. Okay. Commissioner Darden.
I'm here.
Sarah Eckhart. I'm here. Tucker Ferguson.
I'm here.
Jimmy Flanagan. Councilmember Flanagan, are you there? We'll watch and see if it comes on. Troy Hill. Troy Hill. Jane Hewson.
Here.
Mark Jones. Mark Jones. Ricky Mateo.
May the fourth be with you, Madam Chair.
Terry Mitchell. Terry Mitchell. We've already heard from Craig Morgan and James Oakley. Dale Ross. Bridget Shea. Okay. Ed Terrio.
Here.
Jeff Trevelyan.
Get that on.
Yes.
Corbin Van Arsdale.
Here.
Okay, so I have marked, so far, I do not have Commissioner Trevelyan, Commissioner Jones, Mayor Hill, or Councilmember Flanagan.
This is Mayor Hill. I'm here.
Okay. Flanagan, Jones, and Trevelyan, are y'all here?
Take the line off.
Yeah.
It's not.
Cynthia, Councilmember Flanagan is trying to get on. He's not on yet, but he's in the process of trying.
Okay.
I think he's looking for the sign-in link. So if I could ask the staff to send that to him, it might help him expedite getting on.
We'll send that to him.
All right, so we'll go ahead and start waiting on, I think, Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Trevelyan. All right, so we'll go ahead and if those folks come on, if somebody would let me know. We do have a quorum, public comments, and again, we're operating in a modified manner for public comments. I have 3 people that have signed up. Rosalind Alexander Kasparek, you're first. You have 3 minutes.
Alexander Kasparek, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
The historic Alexander Farm and Alexander Cemetery at Pilot Knob sits on the US 183 from State Highway 71 expansion route. The farm has been in our African American family for more than 150 years. Our existence celebrates the Black history of a Texas land grant plantation that is now best known as McKinney Falls State Park. The plantation was built on slave labor, funded the Texas Revolution in part, and was first partially gifted to, then bought and deeded to the African Americans who built it. The Alexander Farm fills in the gaps between slavery, commerce, horse racing, and perseverance on land that was first formed 83 million years ago as a subterranean volcano. Our family progenitor, Daniel Alexander, was among the first African American landowners in Travis County, if not the first. He came to the McKinneys as a child, and our early family history dovetails that of the McKinney family history. The historic and cultural significance of the Alexander Farm and Cemetery to the county, the city, the state, and the nation is immeasurable and irreplaceable. Its homestead has been recognized as one of very few African American 150-year family farms in Texas by the Texas Department of Agriculture. The Alexander Farm in our land has been part of the Carver Museum permanent collection since 1979. The farm has been deemed historic by the Travis County Historical Commission, and the Texas Historical Commission designated the cemetery an historic landmark. For years after the opening of the Austin Bergstrom International Airport, the Alexander Farm family story was featured on the informational kiosk adjacent to Barbara Jordan's statue. We asked for and requested these few minutes to share a bit of our history with the Campo Board because 21 of the projects listed in your 2045 Regional Transportation Plan will adversely affect the Alexander Farm. TxDOT's US 183 expansion study, as preliminarily presented, would obliterate the Alexander Farm and the irreplaceable historical, cultural, anthropological, and environmental assets that are unearthed on it. We ask that you remember us as you study and consider these diverse projects and their impact on Austin and its annexed and surrounding communities. So much of Black Texas has been lost, hidden, and stolen since its antebellum beginning. Thank you for listening and honoring the Alexander Farm's invaluable significance in reversing that travesty. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Bill Bunch. Mr. Bunch, you have 3 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Chair Long, Vice Chair Kitchen, members of the Policy Board. Bill Bunch here with Save Our Springs Alliance. You've received quite a few comments from us and from our supporters on the 2045 plan, both the process and the substance. But I just wanted to make a couple of comments further on the process in particular. The draft plan that you got at the 12th hour, I guess, after the comments period even extended and closed, has about 45 pages of information that was never made available to the public to comment on. There's still supporting documents, to my knowledge, have not been made public, including, most importantly, the traffic modeling analysis itself. There's only a few pages with the conclusory elements that are now in the final draft, or what looks like to be the draft y'all are voting on today anyway. It's telling you that congestion would be less than if you did nothing over the next 25 years, or our region did nothing. Which is not particularly helpful information. It does admit that congestion in the modeling would get worse than it is today. So it's a plan for failure. Without having the actual modeling exercise and the methodology and the information made available to the public, it's impossible for the public to comment in any fashion on that whatsoever. The initial draft that was posted for public comment was itself labeled initial partial draft. That was up through the initial run. Then there was a somewhat expanded version published for the last week that it was extended, that added some additional information. And then now you have yet a third draft that you're looking to vote on, which has had zero opportunity for public comment. And so we don't see how that can match any sort of obligation under federal law for a reasonable public opportunity to comment. We would also point out, as we have before, that the map that's published on the website has been wrong from the beginning in failing to show a number of new road projects that are in the plan in the Edwards Aquifer watershed in western Hays County. So grossly misleading and inaccurate. Finally, the staff in the draft plan that you're voting on today on page 5, it essentially brags about how you're doing things much better than
Your time is up,
2040.
Mr. Blanche.
All right.
All right. Next, we have Zenobia Joseph. You have 3 minutes, Ms. Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. I'm Zenobia Joseph. My comments today are specifically related to the public comment process, like Mr. Bunch just mentioned, and also to ladders of opportunity. Specifically as it relates to the public comment process, I would ask you to consider same-day sign-up and for it to actually have a number on the screen, just like Travis County Commissioner's Court. I know at your last meeting, Councilmember Kitchen asked that you consider this request as well. It is very simple. You can ask Mr. Larry Schooler, Travis County Commissioner's Court. The number scrolls on the screen in real time, and the public simply dials in, and Judge Eckhart asks if anybody is on the line. I think you can adopt the same type of methodology. As it relates to ladders of opportunity, you've heard me speak many times on Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I want you to recognize that when you approved your Unified Planning Work Program on June 10th, 2019, it specified ladders of opportunity, access to essential services, and specifically, I'm going to read what's in the document. CAMPO will work with regional partners to identify connectivity gaps in accessing essential services, including employment, healthcare, schools, education, and recreation. It goes on to say that you'll identify infrastructure and operational solutions, especially for those who are underrepresented or underserved populations, and it also mentions safety and conditions for pedestrians. I want you to recognize that the inequities that exist, if you do nothing about these inequities, you are essentially being complicit in a racist regional remap. And what I mean by that is specifically there's a lack of connectivity in Northeast, Northwest Austin because Capital Metro eliminated Northeast-West connectivity for CAP remap. I want you to understand as well that there is a 425-acre development east Palmer Lane, east of Samsung. And so I would ask you to recognize as you're looking at projects to look at CAP remap and actually the Project Connect overlay to determine if you are actually meeting the ladders of opportunity provision. Specifically, that's through the Federal Highway Administration. You rely on approximately $5.1 million, and that money is used for staff salaries. It's for planning, overhead, and related issues like rent as well. And so you have an obligation, and while I recognize that oftentimes you think you don't have control over Capital Metro's decisions, you have said in your documentation that you do have an obligation under ladders of opportunity, specifically as it relates to health care. Blacks and minorities do not have access to St. David's North because Capital Metro eliminated the bus route that was in excess. It exceeded the ridership, 20.3 riders an hour. It was $945,000, and the minimum was 10 or 12 riders rather on the weekend, 15 riders an hour on the weekday. And I thank you so much for allowing me to speak. If you have any questions, I'll gladly.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. That concludes those who have signed up for public comment, and we'll move on to chair announcements. Just as an agenda note, I'm going to move item number 9 up to before item number 5. There's several folks that might have to leave early, and I want to be able to bring that item up. And so we'll move on now to a report from Mr. Hodge, the Technical Advisory Committee Chair. Mr. Hodge.
Thank you, Chairman Long. This is Mike Hodge, Chair of the Technical Advisory Committee. At our April 24th meeting, we had 2 action items. We unanimously approved the amendments to the 2019-2022 TIP. You should have those on your agenda for action. In addition to that, we also approved the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. We had much discussion on that. Ultimately, we approved the plan to move forward with a recommendation that we work with the 2020 census to incorporate that into the demographics for the study. So that's all I have for my report, Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hodge? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Hearing no questions, we're going to move on to agenda item number 9. I'll give our support team an opportunity to get to the right place in the slide deck. All right, there we go. Thank you. Item number 9 is the discuss and take appropriate action on adoption of the draft 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. And I'm going to let Mr. Porter do his part of the presentation, and then we'll get the public comments or the folks that have signed up for this agenda item. So go ahead, Mr. Porter.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've been working on this plan really over the last five years or so through the Platinum planning process, doing special studies and working with local governments to really build a bottom-up approach to the long-range plan. Back last fall, we requested that folks interested in submitting projects into the plan go ahead and submit. We received 20 applications from 20 different sponsors, 642 projects total. 557 of those were potential candidates for the constrained project list. We had about $42.5 billion worth of those candidates submitted to us, and about $7 billion worth of projects that were submitted for the illustrative list, which, remember, those aren't necessarily part of the constraint plan, but really significant projects that local governments and project sponsors might find important to identify as potential needs long-term. Our regional fiscal capacity, that regional fiscal constraint number, our region's capacity to potentially pay for projects over the next 25 years is at $42 billion. That includes the commitment from the Texas Transportation Commission. And with that being said, any projects that were 100% locally funded in the current TIP and also scored a 59 or above with that project selection criteria that was developed in partnership with the TAC made it into the long-range planning process. So that means 539 projects out of 557 were included in the constrained project list. Next slide, please. So as part of some of the work we've done with local governments as well as with this body, the board, we then went through a process to do 3 model runs based on the final draft project list that we received as staff. We do 3 runs. One is essentially looking at the existing network, and then there are 2 looking at the forecast network, one that includes a scenario if we only build what's committed, and a scenario in that we build what's in that constrained project list. Essentially what it tells us is that things will get a lot worse if we only build what is necessarily committed in the TIP right now. If we do follow through and go through implementing the projects that are in the constraint project list, we will see some benefit. Instead of things, as you see with the time spent on the roads, congestion rates and speeds, instead of things doubling or speeds cutting in half, we see those things being mitigated considerably. So it shows us the project list does have some beneficial impact. And I do want to reiterate that this does include both transit as well as roadway projects that are being modeled. Next slide, please. All right, so you all received a link to an updated draft of the plan. We've provided a draft of the plan to TAC every month since January and to this body every month since February. So it's evolved over time. We've in the draft that you all got, we've added a lot more information about safety throughout the document. We've also beefed up the centers analysis to not just show the general analysis of where we had some of those metrics, population and street grid outlined, with employment, we also went through to see what impact some of the platinum planning processes that or program plans that you all have worked with us on have, what type of metrics, how those things align. We've also included, of course, the updated model results that I just presented to you all. We had to have the project list in order to complete that, and that's also with the environmental justice and vulnerability analysis that's included in this draft. DOIS included the information from Phase 2 of public outreach. We also put a little epilogue note in there about COVID-19, and we've updated some of the maps, and we'll also be updating that active transportation map based on some of the information we just got in from our partners with the City of Austin. And then also too, we put some additional information in there about that, as our TAC chair, Mike Hodge, just said, we're going to be updating the demographic forecast as we get the additional census data in. That's coming in probably around 2022. So we can go on to the next slide. Well, may the 4th be with us. We are finally here at board action. We've gone through this list for the last several months, basically checking things off as we've gone through it on the plan development, and we are here for board action. Next part, we'll be talking about some of the things we heard for public outreach from DOIS.
Thanks, Kelly. If you could go to the next slide, please. So as Kelly mentioned, this RTP has been in the works through the platinum planning process for 5 years now. So I want to take everyone back to 2016 and just give you a reminder of the plans and studies and public outreach that has been happening through this 5-year time period. So we've done some local plans and studies through Williams Drive in Georgetown, Wirtz Dam in Burnett County, and also the Luling Transportation Study. The Regional Active Transportation Plan looked at active transportation needs throughout the 6-county region. That included 22 public meetings, over 2,000 surveys and public comments, and we also had 20 local government meetings to collaborate with the project sponsors and the local government on the community's needs for active transportation. The Regional Arterials Concept Inventory started in spring 2018 and included 27 public meetings with over 450 attendees at those public meetings. We also received over 2,000 surveys and public comments through that process, and we also collaborated with the local governments and the project sponsors on the arterials inventory. The Regional Transportation Demand Management Study included an FHWA workshop, and we also did interviews with project sponsors and local employers that may want to put into practice or improve their TDM practices. The Regional Incident Management Study included stakeholder interviews as well as input from the public and private sectors. And the Regional Transit Study included 17 public meetings. As a reminder, that was outside of Capital Metro service area. And those 17 public meetings included over 125 attendees, over 100 surveys, and public comments on what is needed for regional transit in the 6-county area. Now for the RTP, we did one round of public outreach this past fall. We had 11 public meetings and over 500 surveys and comments were completed in that first round of outreach. Round 2 has definitely been a different type of outreach than we typically do, which I'll discuss a little bit further in a moment. But we did have 2 in-person community meetings and then also held 4 remote open houses. Through those remote open houses, we actually had 90 attendees, over 90 attendees, which has outpaced the 11 public meetings we had in person and the attendees at those in-person meetings we held in the fall. This time around, we received over 1,000 surveys and comments, which I will talk about a little further in detail. Steve, if you could go to the next slide, please. So the second round of public comment opened February 24th, so it was open for a little over 2 months. We had the online open house with the interactive map, the project list, and the draft plan document, as well as a survey that opened on February 24th. We originally had 16 open houses and pop-up events scheduled for this second round of outreach. We were able to hold 2 of those events in person before the stay-at-home orders were issued, and we had to transition to a remote format. So as I mentioned, we did modify our techniques that did not involve face-to-face interactions. We held online open houses and had actually very good turnout for those. The online public hearing was held by this body on April 6th, and we did extend the comment period based on public feedback for an additional week, and that just closed last Monday. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we had to cancel the majority of those in-person events. We did modify the open houses to have those done remotely. There was a call-in option for those that were not able to participate online, whether that was for internet access or access to a computer or smartphone. People were able to call in. They could also call and receive information mailed to them and receive a survey by mail if that was something that they needed. We had phone numbers set up as well, both English and Spanish, where the public could call in and leave voicemail comments. That's not something we typically do, but being that these were very different circumstances, we wanted to make it as easy for the public as possible to be able to submit comments to the board. Next slide, please. So what we heard for this second round of outreach, we received over 600 survey responses. The surveys were asking the public the top 5 priority projects they would like to see after I-35, since the policy board had named I-35 as their top priority. So the public, through those 5 different responses, were able to select the same project multiple times if they wanted to. So though we had 600 survey responses, there were 875 responses identifying RM620 as their top priority. We also, in the rounding out the top 5, had priorities for State Highway 71, for transit projects, and also active transportation projects. Half of the comments and the survey results came in the last 2 weeks. We were closely monitoring to see if there was any drop off in public responses with people having to stay at home, but we actually saw quite an increase in the last 2 weeks of the comment period. So the stay-at-home orders did not seem to affect the public's ability to be able to participate and submit comments and survey results. We did, through the surveys, about 40% of those comments and surveys were received from the Western Travis County area of the region. And in addition to the survey responses, we received over 500 email comments. Initially, in the first half of the comment period, we received a couple hundred emails requesting an updated draft of the RTP document and to extend the comment period so that the updated draft could be further reviewed by the public. So we were responsive to that request of a couple hundred emails. We updated the draft RTP and also extended the comment period for an additional week so that the public had the benefit of reviewing the updated draft and being able to comment a little bit longer. Through those emails, we also received several hundred requests to remove some projects in Hays County. I know that Hays County Commissioner's Court is going to be working on that locally. And Commissioner Jones, if there's anything that you would like to add to that, certainly we're willing to hear that. In addition to those comments, there was just general support for the RTP. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to have those, or also yield to Commissioner Jones if he wants to expand on the Hays County requests.
Commissioner Jones, do you have anything to add to that?
All right, I think I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Not letting me unmute.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I don't think it's letting me unmute.
We can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, Hays County in 2013, you know, we had we did our transportation plan and we've updated it with several roads since then. But on our first meeting in April, we signed a contract to do an updated version of our transportation plan. So we're in the middle of that. And so we will be working on that over the next several months.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Johnson, do you want to wrap up the staff part of the presentation, and then we can go to the folks who have signed up to speak on this agenda item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to reiterate a few points that you heard from Campo staff. I've been working with Vice Chair Kitchen over the past few days on some items that we were trying to wrap up in relation to the 2045 plan. One concerns a map of bike ped projects. We, Campo staff, have been trying to get a layer of information from City of Austin staff. Unbeknownst to either party, they were sending the information to us, but it wasn't coming through. And Vice Chair Kitchen and I figured that out this morning. That has since been resolved. ATD staff sent us a link, and we were able to download the information. So the information updates to the bicycle pedestrian map will be made by Campo staff starting immediately. Then likewise, you heard Mr. Porter talk about demographic forecast. As we committed to this body a month or so ago, we are committed to going back and producing a new look at the demographic forecast when we receive the data from the U.S. Census. We expect that data to come in somewhere around late 2021, 2022. At that time, we also expect that we will have seen at least 2 reports from the Texas Comptroller on financial issues. And so we will probably also be revisiting fiscal constraint at the same time that we are looking at updating the demographic forecast. And then last, when the City of Austin brought in some suggestions about changes to the 2045 plan at the last TAC meeting, one of the items that they mentioned was updating one of the charts in the 2045 plan where there should have been a definition of transportation demand management. At the time, I thought we had already done that, but I did tell the TAC that we would go back and check. We did go back and check, and the information was not there. We have since added the definitional language to the 2045 plan on TDM. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We'll go ahead now and move to there are, looks like 6 individuals that have signed up to speak on this topic. And I would ask that if you've already spoken during public comment, that you don't need to repeat yourself, but certainly if you have new information, but just if you've already spoken, you don't have to necessarily repeat that again. So with that, we'll start out with Wallace Goodman. Are you there? Wallace Goodman. I know I heard you there earlier. Are you there, Wallace Goodman?
Madam Chair, do you have the callers muted?
I am not in control of that.
She's unmuted on our end, Madam Chair. I think she may be muted on her end.
Wallace Goodman, if you are muted on your phone or your device, please unmute it. We cannot hear you. Okay, I tell you what, we'll skip that one and see if we can't get that remedied at the end. We'll go on to Deborah Morris.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You've got 3 minutes. Go ahead and start.
Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity. I'm a resident of Radiance on Crystal Hills Drive, which runs off of 1826 in Northwest Hays County. I'm on the Property Owners Association for Radiance, so I want to begin by echoing the words of Bill Brock, President of the Association, to the Hays County Commissioners, and copied, I believe, to the Campo Board. We believe a pause is in order. Hardly anyone from our neighborhood is currently driving to work, and we know this also holds true for the neighborhoods closest to us. Indeed, work patterns may be permanently shifted after this period. So to go forward with a plan based on previous year's traffic projections and which also ignores new realities does not make sense. Planning for the future is always sensible, but only if the planning is realistic and not fanciful. I would say that, although probably many members of the Campo board will disagree, Save Our Springs traffic projections seem far more realistic for this area, by which I mean they're fully mindful of the growth that has already taken place, yet more realistic in that the projections are not actually predicated on the sprawling development that would be made possible only after new or greatly expanded roadways have been built. Planning seems especially unrealistic, in fact, irresponsible, if the whole point is to facilitate as much growth as possible, whether or not the growth is desirable or wise. So I simply want to urge the Campo board to step back and continue to consider what is really desirable for Austin and the surrounding area. There can never be too much such discussion and reflection because what is paved forever. And I want to close by referencing one of the first pieces of really distressing news I heard after businesses in Texas were shut down due to the pandemic, namely that Threadgills would close permanently. Despite the restaurant's long and storied history and loyal clientele, it couldn't weather this latest challenge. What this makes clear, I think, is that we have to be especially mindful of the things that make Austin such a special and unique place and conserve them as best we can. We can and should do that with our roads and planning for them as well. Please, in your continuing deliberations, protect the things that make the Texas Hill Country a really precious thing. Open spaces, clean water, clean air, the beautiful landscape, because once these things are gone, they're gone forever. Thank you. Hello?
Yes.
Thank you.
Abby Waldman Delosier.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm a realtor for 36 years. I work Hayes County, Blanco County, Comal, Williamson, Travis. I'm in my car 1,000 miles easily every year. I have been driving these areas, and smart growth supports business. Density should focus in areas off of the fragile aquifer. A recent study I heard quoted by David Baker of Wimberley Water told me that we have now reached a tipping point that there is less water being generated we're using more water, than the earth generates. Longtime spring-fed creeks that I am on all the time showing property are drying up with global warming, and most of all because of density and high usage. When you go to Florida, I went in a recent vacation. You have unmitigated sprawl along the beaches, and it's awful. When you go to California, where I also was last summer, you have preserved beaches, lakes, and mountains, and this contributes billions of dollars to business and tourism and growth with the people that live there, but smart growth off of the areas that are important to the environment. The buyers I work with want low density, they want scenic beauty, and most of all, they want water to drink. I think we have to make a scenic conservation road designation, and it preserves these areas on the Edwards Aquifer. Once you pave over this, as we've all heard today, it's irrevocable. You're showing on your projection in your study that I read a 267% population increase per year data in Hayes County alone, where the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone is. If you were to pass this plan as currently shown, you will have a water crisis and you will irrevocably pave over and damage the aquifer. You know, President Roosevelt had the wisdom in 1901 to create the National Forest Service, and he named 150 national forests, 51 federal bird preserves, 5 national parks, and national monuments, including the Grand Canyon, Lassen, Gila Cliffs, Muir Woods, and natural bridges. It is imperative that you slow down and stop. Commissioner Jones from Hays County just said they need 2 more months to finish their road plan. You yourselves do not have the traffic modeling study. How can you create a road plan if you're missing a critical piece, the traffic modeling study? This would be, to me, ludicrous today to vote on this and pass this without taking pause and getting this important data as well as more information from the public. We need this vision to preserve the recharge areas so we all have water to drink. How can we live without water? I think it would be a careless and grave, irrevocable mistake with far-reaching implications that will affect 4.67 million people if you pass this plan.
Ms. Delosier, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delosier.
Sorry, trying to turn it off here. Okay, next we have Jay Crossley. Mr. Crossley, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so very much. Thank you all for your service to all the people of the Austin region and for this time. My name is Jay Blazek Crossley. I'm with a 501c3 nonprofit called Farm and City, and I've been participating in this process for a long time and just hope to make a couple points before you vote on this. I think most importantly is that the biggest transportation problem in our region is our traffic crashes. It's a much bigger problem than, say, congestion in terms of pain and suffering, but also just in terms of pure economic impact. And so I very much appreciate the many ways in which this plan is much better than the previous plan in terms of focusing on safety. But I do believe that you can and should take more responsibility for your role in ensuring that we can end traffic deaths and serious injuries in the region. So explicitly, I believe there should be a goal as a key part of this plan to end traffic deaths by the end of this plan. And that you should, over the next year, work to develop regional strategies and figure out how regional decision-making impacts traffic deaths. A key little note on page 29, there's sort of a reference that claims that the region isn't really as bad as the rest of Texas. And that's somewhat misleading. And looking at traffic deaths per VMT is a terribly useless measure. If you look at traffic deaths per capita, the Austin region is the worst major metro in Texas, the most dangerous. And I also have to say that I've submitted to you a report. I've asked for public information requests and gotten some and not gotten some. But I think the regional growth forecast process is seriously flawed, and the travel demand models are seriously flawed. And you should take these next 2 years not just to look for new census data, but to look for a new way to be making these decisions going forward. And I believe we should move towards a meaningful alternatives analysis system where we entertain different reasonable visions for the future in terms of where people will live and work. And by only entertaining the radical sprawl vision that is the current growth forecast, then all of your models show these terrible outcomes of increasing vehicle miles traveled, increasing traffic, increasing everything. And that's not at all necessary. And so I hope you'll very seriously change the way we talk about regional growth going forward so that you can make better decisions going forward. And I just think we, the people of the Austin region, need to focus on access to safe multimodal access for all. And that is the primary role of this MPO, is to improve everyone's safe access to everything else in the region. And this is much improvement over the last one.
Your time is up, Mr. Crossley. Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Bill Bunch. Mr. Bunch, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. I'll finish up the thought I got cut off on last time and then move to new material. I'm just noting that I believe it's page 5 of the draft you're working on today, sort of touts the idea that this planning process has been so much better than the 2040 planning process because you started 4 years ago. Having started 4 years ago, there's really no excuse of any kind to have not had a complete working draft up and posted for public comment throughout the public comment period, along with the accurate map of the projects in the draft plan, and along with all the supporting documentation, including specifically the traffic modeling analysis itself and the methodologies. And I'm sure there's others that have yet to be disclosed to the public. One last point on the process, the public comment tool that was on the website did not even ask for the commenter to give their name or an email address, actively soliciting anonymous comments. It did ask for your zip code, and that's the only identifying information. It then had a 3 or 4 question survey on, what projects are most important to you. And then it had, if you want to tell us something else, a box that was literally less than 1 line long, basically designed to actively discourage any sort of meaningful public input. So most of the public input that you got was delivered to you through communication tools that went around this active discouragement for meaningful comment on the plan. So we sure hope that the board members have taken a chance to look at that stuff. On the merits of the plan, just wanted to quickly point out the demographic projections for Western Hays County are literally off the charts ridiculous. Our transportation planner, who's closely looked at the last 4 long-range plans for Campo, Mr. Norm Marshall from Smart Mobility, analyzed that data, and it projects over 430% growth over the next 30 years over the Edwards Aquifer and upstream in Western Hays, when the actual trends are at about 54, 55% total growth over that period. Literally almost an order of magnitude off. And if you go through and click through and see, the underlying projections for
Mr. Bunch, your time is up. Thank you. Next, we have Zenobia Joseph. Ms. Joseph?
Yes, Madam Chair. Are you ready? I hear your ringer.
Yes, sorry. Go ahead and start.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, board members. I'm Zenobia Joseph. My comments are specifically related to the projects that are on page 37. It's specifically the transit projects. These are supposed to be part of Project Connect, and one of the things that I asked Mr. Johnson was for the public input, and I understand from the staff that you're not required to get that from Capital Metro and that they're not able to analyze it extensively. I would simply ask that you put that in the backup materials transparently so that the public can see it. Specifically, I am concerned about the Slaughter Lane project to Goodnight Ranch. That's townhomes. That was not something that was discussed extensively at Capital Metro's board. As a matter of fact, I said before, the St. David's bus route generated 20.3 riders an hour. It was $945,000. Capital Metro eliminated that route and created the one to Slaughter for half the riders at twice the cost, 10.3 riders an hour for $1.8 million. And so what I would ask you to recognize is that you had a Project Connect North Corridor locally preferred alternative study, which specified that the growth was in North Austin through 2035. And these projects miraculously are now in South Austin. I will tell you from a historical perspective, in 2016, Councilmember Kitchen argued with the consultant because she didn't believe the growth was north of the river. And so it's incestuous the way some of these projects are made. I would ask you to look at the data and to make data-driven decisions based on the locally preferred alternative study for North Austin. I would also ask you to recognize that the Samsung has invested over $17 billion over 20 years, and Apple has invested billions of dollars too. It's a billion-dollar corridor with no bus. And even though you have some projects in that plan, the one to Apple is not taken in consideration. Harris Branch and Applied Materials all the way to Apple. And the Dassault bus route is going to Austin Community College, Highland. I want you to understand that the December 17, 2018 map that was approved for Project Connect actually excludes the area north of North Lamar Transit Center, north of US 183, because that's TxDOT's right of way, and it was not discussed. The maps show that it will not be viewed for 24 to 30 years. And so I would ask you to recognize that there's a connectivity gap there. I would also ask you to recognize that as it relates to the transportation demand management, if you need to cut a project, I would say that $225 would be a good place to start. Movability Austin's, their mission is exclusionary. They're a 501c6, which means they have membership only. And their mission statement specified that they are there exclusively to help commuters get to work. Samsung is one of their, the people that are the organizations that's a part of Movability, but Movability has not looked at transit-dependent riders.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Your time is up. I think we have identified Wallace Goodman. Mr. Goodman, did we find you?
Yes, you did. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thanks very much. I want to thank you all for your time and trot out my standard dog and pony, which is that I teach high school. And one of the things I'm trying to do and prepare my students for the world that they're going to inherit is to introduce them to the notion of the climate emergency that we're in. Both Travis County and the city of Austin have formally declared a climate emergency. And in looking through, and I haven't studied carefully, but just even looking on page 11 on the 2045 draft plan, addressing the climate emergency has got to be a major part of what we're doing as a world. And that if we don't, then we're really consigning future generations of people to, you know, some people would say a kind of terror in their lives. Furthermore, people in this part of the world are thinking systematically about how to address all this. Out of the University of Texas, Planet Texas 2050 is a major research organization that is talking about how we can develop more sustainably. And so it's just difficult I'm telling my students about what all is going on with this and trying in my mind to square a $242 billion price tag, which largely is accounted for the building of more roads and to facilitate development, and to try to square those two in my head. And it's difficult to do so. And so I would just encourage the people on this commission. I remember Councilmember Alter said in a meeting I was in that she thought that there were, you know, like 3 new urbanists in her entire district. I think there are more people out there, very many more, and their numbers increasing almost by the day, who are concerned about the you know, really the planet and the lives our children are going to inherit. And then furthermore, that we need, therefore, never to build any more new roads, but that at the very, very, very top of any list, considering those construction of those roads, should be the climate emergency. And it's not obvious here on page 11. So I just wanted to offer that input. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Okay, that concludes our individuals who have signed up for this particular agenda item. And so to kind of stick with Robert's Rules of Order, I'll entertain a motion in a second, and then we'll open up for discussion.
So
It's Judge Eckhart. I must ring off for a moment, but I'm coming back to the Campo Policy Board. We've got a press conference with regard to COVID-19, but I do just want to put a pin in place on the travel demand management, the transportation demand management, and come back to it if I may.
I'm not sure what that means, but sure. I mean, I'm not sure what you're asking for.
I make a motion to approve the 2045 plan.
What I'm asking.
Second.
Okay, who made the second?
Ross.
Okay, there's a motion by Mayor Morgan and a second by Mayor Ross. Okay, now we're open for discussion. Judge Eckhart.
Asking for, Chairwoman, is that I would like to make a motion to amend the 2045 plan to include the transportation demand management policy that was voted in September of 2019, which includes the definition and the three policies along with it. I'm sorry to say that it even requires a motion since it was already voted in September. But recognizing that it's not in there, I just wanted to get that corrected.
So who made the second?
Rigid.
Shea. Thank you. Ashby, do you have, or Kelly, any input on that particular section of the plan that would help clarify?
So we did make a change to the plan a few days ago that included the definitions that were voted on, like Descartes said. The only thing that we didn't put in there was language about a 5% target. When we went back and checked, we couldn't find that the board voted on that.
The board voted on it in two separate agenda items in September of 2019.
And that's the meeting we checked, Judge. We'll go back and take a fresh look at it, but we couldn't find it.
And if you will recall, I had to bring the policy because I couldn't get staff to bring it. So it came under a request for an agenda item by me, and it was voted in two separate votes. One of which was explicitly to include it in the 2045 plan. The definition, as well as the 5%, as well as a intention to score non-transportation demand management projects that had TDM aspects, to award them points as well, to assure that what was good for the goose was good for the gander. I remain very frustrated that staff seems to either not want to address this or to ignore it when it does get addressed.
Judge, we did go back since on the issue of the criteria for the projects, we did go back and put that in. So that is now in place.
Ashby, is it possible, Judge Eckhart referenced a specific date for the meeting? Did you look at the actual video itself? Maybe it was referenced in the video and not necessarily captured in the notes regarding that 5%? Because it sounds like from everything else, you included that in there from the TDM to make sure it's in there.
From what my staff has told me, and NIRVED went back and looked at the video.
Cynthia, could I speak?
Frustrated by this. And
Judge Eckhart, I have the reference right in front of me. So Ashby, I just texted you. I took a picture from the minutes and I just texted it to you. So it is definitely in the minutes from that meeting. We adopted the minutes in October. So in our October board package, you can see the minutes. And I just texted them to you.
And Madam Chair. Just a minute. Councilmember Kitchen, would you just read that item, please?
Yes. I have part of it, and Judge Eckhart will have to tell me if I'm reading the right part, but it's the minutes say adoption. It was divided into three votes. So recommendation number 2. Establish a target amount.
Mute their phone. Thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Establish a targeted amount or percentage of funding for the TIP program and RTP plan for TDM measures as presented. There's the ayes and nays and abstain, and then at the bottom it says adopted as presented by majority vote.
So if I hear that correctly, and I'm now recalling the discussion, there was not a percentage put in there, but it was just to say, consider a target.
It says, establish a targeted amount or percentage of funding for the TIP program and RTP plan for TDM measures was adopted as presented by a majority vote.
And when it says as presented, the backup for that item was my memo.
So do any other policy board members, I'm looking at the meeting minutes now, but I remember the discussion. I don't remember us ever agreeing on a percentage at that meeting. I think there was going to be some work done on it and come back. I can't remember.
That's why you have meeting minutes and clear backup. So the documents that were included in the backup and then the subsequent minutes should corroborate what occurred that day. If there was some confusion about it, that should have been cleared up in the approval of the minutes. But I'm continually frustrated by this. You would think that the documents and the meeting minutes would create a sufficient clarity here so that we wouldn't be at the vote of the 2045 plan still having these discussions.
Ashby, is it possible? So, and it sounds like, you know, what Judge Eckhart's saying is there's 5% was in her backup memo. Madam Chair says that, you know, it shows a discussion about assigning percentage. Is there any hindrance to us assigning 5%? Is that something that's outside the realm? Is that an issue of concern? Does that sound too extreme, too small? Has staff actually looked at that, or, you know, is there any clarity you can add to that?
The board can take whatever action it wants to.
Okay.
There's not an issue on our side.
And it's not just the 5%. The other two policy provisions also are not reflected in the 2045 plan, even though they were voted. The use of transportation to support continued reduction of per capita vehicle miles and vehicle hours traveled and improved travel time liability, and the other policy directive, which is in project calls for available CAMPO discretionary federal funding, the scoring criteria will award extra points for infrastructure projects that incorporate TDM elements.
And
Commissioner Terrio, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. I do recall the discussion back in the fall. And as I recall, there were some concerns specifically related to a percentage being set aside for those projects or projects with those features, specifically from the smaller jurisdictions. Caldwell County, as I recall, Judge from Burnett County also had a similar concern. We talked back and forth about that during the meeting somewhat, and there were some discussions regarding maybe some alternative strategies rather than just having a flat percentage. Maybe in the scoring criteria there could be a different methodology used on that. But I'm sorry, but I don't remember an affirmative vote specifically relating to that. I may have missed it. I mean, I know Judge Eckhart has the minutes there that appear to say that. That wasn't my recollection. And I would be against.
Why we rely on minutes. That's the reason why we rely.
I understand. I just wanted.
And the fact of it is, if there had been a discussion that staff was supposed to come back with an alternative to the 5%, that never occurred. So I must go do this this press conference with regard to COVID-19. I would ask that this specific I would like to return to this discussion. Hopefully the press conference won't take me long. And I apologize that there is so much going on right now, but I'll have to ring off and ring back into this discussion. Perhaps, Madam Chair, if you could table this motion while you discuss some of the others, and I will return.
Okay, thank you, Judge Eckhart. And I think Mayor Adler said he was going to that same press conference.
Yes.
So I believe there were, and just we'll return to that one after we finish the others. But somebody has their.
That's the press.
Mute your microphone, Commissioner Shea. Thank you. All right, so the floor is open. I think there are two items that City of Austin wanted to present, and Councilmember Kitchen.
Yes, we had two items we wanted to present, and they were in everyone's backup. Let me say thank you to Ashby just sending them out to everyone on Friday, as well as a reminder this morning. The first one, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Alter if she would like to speak to that, because it relates to the system preservation objective. And then when she's done with that, if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll speak to the second one, which relates to environmental mitigation strategy.
All right, Councilmember Alter.
Thank you, Councilmember Kitchen. Before I introduce this amendment, I did have a quick clarifying question. Ashby, I'm trying to find where in the backup that we had for the draft that we're approving, the TDM definition was placed. 16 and 17, where I see TDM stuff, is that the wrong place? I was trying to get someone's attention before to be called on, but.
Councilmember, let me ask Kelly to address that because he wrote the language and put it in.
Okay, so I just want to understand how you have incorporated what you have. Okay, so thank you. So I wanted to speak to amendment number 1, which is the system preservation objective. So this is on that chart where we have the goals and is in those sort of little definitions. And the current text reads, system preservation, use operations, ITS, and optimization techniques to expand the useful life cycle of the multimodal system elements. I believe that optimization techniques is not accurate enough or not specific enough, and wanted to suggest instead capital rehabilitation and reconstruction techniques to extend the useful life cycle of the multimodal system elements.
I wanted to suggest also, as we have this discussion, it might be useful to take.
Is there a, Councilmember, are you seconding that motion so we can discuss it? Okay.
Yes. And if I could suggest that we take off the presentation that's on the screen right now, it might be easier for us to see each other, and we could actually pull up these amendments, which I believe are on page 62 or 3 of the document that has the memo in it.
67.
Page 67. That might be helpful for people.
So there's been a motion and a second to amend the original motion, which is to add this new definition. My question is, this was brought before the TAC. What was the TAC's recommendation on this? Ashby, could you tell us what the TAC's recommendation was on this particular item?
The TAC did not support it, Madam Chair.
Was it that the TAC did not support it, or the TAC didn't feel like it could make a policy decision?
It was, to be more accurate, Councilmember Alter, they thought it was policy.
So that's very different than them saying that they didn't support it. It simply means that they thought that was out of their responsibility for it. which is very different than voting against it because it's bad policy.
So is there anyone else that wants to comment on this recommended amendment?
This is Commissioner Terrio.
Yes, Commissioner.
Ashby, when you said the TAC did not support it, was there an actual vote, a motion to include this, and then a negative vote relating to it?
So, Commissioner, initially, the city of Austin sent over a list of 6 items that they wanted included as part of the amendments to the 2045 RTP. The TAC looked at the information, they discussed it at some length, and they only opted to take one item, which was updating the demographic forecast and fiscal constraint.
And Ashby, did they do that because they felt the other items are a policy decision for the policy board, or did they just have no opinion either way on the other remaining 5?
The discussion around the table was they thought those were policy decisions and not their purview.
Commissioner Long, or Chair Long, could I speak to this?
Sure.
Okay, this is Councilmember Kitchen. I want to focus us. This is only one of the things the city of Austin brought to TAC. We're not bringing forward the other ones. This one is very focused, as Councilmember Alter said. It's simply clarifying a word that we have in our list of objectives. That's all it's doing, because we have the word optimization techniques, which is just not clear. So we're simply suggesting that the word optimization include capital rehabilitation and reconstruction. And it's all we're talking about here is the list of things that system preservation means. What does that mean? What does that mean when we're talking about preserving the system to preserve the life cycle of a particular element? So optimization, the thinking is that it's not sufficiently clear, and we're simply suggesting that capital rehabilitation and construction techniques is one of the things that we mean by optimization.
Is there anybody else that would like to comment on this item before I do?
Just one comment, Commissioner Terrio.
Yes.
Chairman Long, is this particular item related to the off-system bridges? And is that the type of system maintenance that is being contemplated?
I don't know. That would have to be it's Councilmember Alter. I don't want to speak for you, but this has been brought up each time in reference to the bridge projects that you talked about. Is that what you're referring to here?
I'm not speaking here to a specific bridge project. And I think the question in those cases is a different issue, is how we define regionally significant, which is separate from this, which is really how do we define what system preservation is. And I think that if you look at what the other MPOs have put forward, which we tried to provide some of that, this is very much in line with what other MPOs include as part of their goals when they talk about system preservation. It is not aimed at any particular project. That project is already, in there. Nothing changes in terms of the projects that are selected as part of the constrained list or the unconstrained list. It is simply a matter of defining what system preservation is. You may recall that when we discussed the stewardship and I was on the committee, we were talking about system preservation, and this is, I have raised several times that I didn't really understand what the term optimization meant. And I think that there are lots of capital rehabilitation and reconstruction things that one might imagine within our system that we might need to be able to pay attention to.
So my comments would be, each time that we discussed this at the policy board, I I didn't hear lots of other folks chiming in, wanting to change the definition, but we certainly have the opportunity today. My concern and my caution is that there are numerous capital rehabilitation and reconstruction projects in every one of our jurisdictions, and it becomes a very slippery slope if we start including that type of activity, and especially as it relates to ITS. As we all know, you have to replace computers and systems every 4 or 5 years. We will likely never get enhancement and expansion projects funded if we start allowing ourselves to include capital rehabilitation and reconstruction. I consider it the responsibility of my county to do those sorts of things, not a regional MPO. So those are my comments. I don't know. Does anybody else have any more before we vote on this amendment?
Cynthia, this is Jimmy.
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
I appreciate that perspective, Commissioner Chair, but I do have to agree with with other members of the policy board that I think we need to be considering capital rehabilitation as an eligible and necessary activity of the MPO. I don't think it necessarily means every capital rehab project is an eligible one, but I do think it is an important component. So I will support this change.
And Madam Chair, I had a comment as well, really kind of a question.
Commissioner Shea, go ahead.
I know, for instance, the Wirtz Dam project was quite a focus of the community comment and input. Would that project be eligible, Campo, once it's built, for any maintenance?
Which project did you mention, Commissioner Shea?
Dam project? I think you're quite familiar with it, yeah.
Okay, I couldn't hear the first word you cut out.
Yeah, the Wirtz Dam project.
So that would not be eligible under capital renewal rehabilitation. It's eligible now under construction.
And it doesn't.
Under a new project.
I'm trying to understand why we have a policy, and it seems like it's not in sync with Houston Galveston or the North Central Texas Council of Governments policies. Why would we have a policy that would allow us to spend significant money building infrastructure, but not maintaining it? If we think the infrastructure is important or regionally significant enough to build and be ranked highly, why would we then say, but we're not going to have anything to do with maintaining it? If it falls apart, too bad. I don't understand it.
I think there's a two-part thing at play here, Commissioner. One, and I can't speak to the NCT COG, but to the Houston Galveston area policy, most of that is contemplated towards on-system projects, and it's assumed that the local governments will take care of their maintenance issues once the projects are built. Then likewise, going back to your example of your question about Wirtz Dam Bridge, it's my understanding, and Judge Oakley can jump in on this one, that would be switched to an on-system roadway. So that would be eligible there. And then to give you another example, Commissioner Shea. So
before you go on, then can I then ask the criteria for making something an on-system roadway? I will just say that one bridge in particular that we had highlighted when we talked about this previously was Redbud, and it is the main artery in and out of a substantial portion of West Austin. So I'm having trouble understanding how Wirtz Dam would qualify to be on system, but Redbud wouldn't.
Because Wirtz Dam, if you look at the two ends of the roadway, at one point they were, at least on one of them, was a spur, and Judge Oakley can give you the spur number for it. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but it was once on system. And there's a written document from TxDOT, from administration, saying that once this project is completed, they will take it on system. Then Burnett County would have to take something else that the state wants to get rid of, and it will go off system. And Judge Oakley, do you want to speak to that? Judge Oakley?
While we're waiting, could I just ask, so it's really just a matter of doing a swap with TxDOT on a road? Because I think that.
Yes, ma'am, it's a lot of it.
I think the city of Austin and Travis County have done swaps with TxDOT on some roads. I think portions of 1626, Mancheck.
Yes, ma'am, but that is on system roadway today.
If I may clarify, I think Ashby, or maybe just stated a different way, what I think I heard you say this, the Houston Galveston MPO, their language with regard to system preservation is the TxDOT system. That's what you're referring to when you say on system. It's not the local roadway system. Is that okay? So I just wanted to see if I could clarify. So, I mean, from my perspective, system preservation as it relates to our regionally significant TxDOT system is what the focus of TIMCO is. And if your amendment were to say excluding, local roadways or to only inclusive of on-system regionally significant roads, I might be okay with that. But again, I think as we've discussed this multiple times at the policy board, each jurisdiction is responsible for maintaining their roads and their bridges. we just spent $2.5 million in Williamson County repairing a bridge and in connecting two neighborhoods. But that is a Williamson County responsibility. And so I think that's where the problem is this appears to open up the door to local maintenance versus regionally significant system-wide maintenance.
Can I just ask?
If I might, Commissioner Chair, if I might. So let me just say, I originally came to focus on the need for system preservation through my knowledge of what was going on with Redbud and the challenges we were facing there. I'm now talking about one of our objectives under stewardship for our 2045 Regional Transportation Plan goals and objectives. And if we have created this plan correctly, we should only be really applying this stuff to our regionally significant roads. So I don't know that we need to qualify it there. We'd have to qualify it in every single one of the objectives that it only applied to regionally significant if that were the case. So I don't really feel like we need to do that in this specific case unless we're going to do it to all of them, which, as I understand it, should have been the goal of this plan. I would like to ask what optimization means then, if that is the alternative that you're thinking of. I don't understand what that means. That seems to refer mostly to kind of technology things, which is not, or like the ITS things, and that was not really the intention of system preservation when we discussed it in the committee. So if somebody can explain to me what optimization means, I would really like to understand that. What optimization techniques are we talking about?
And Councilmember, I'm asking Kelly to speak to that.
In that sense, it is talking about, it's not so much it's talking about things that would be found in like our CMP. It's ways to not add capacity, but to get more out of the system. So it's specifically looking at things along the lines of more like your ITS situations and other things like that, sinking lights, those types of things.
I mean, when we talk about capital renewal and rehab, we're not talking about maintenance. We're talking about, bigger things that if you didn't continue doing them, the whole system might implode. I mean, I don't think that optimization is really getting us where we need to go.
Kelly, to Councilman or Councilwoman Alter's point, the definition that you gave or the explanation that you gave regarding optimization, is that the industry standard for that? Or is this is what she's asking for atypical? Because you heard Madam Chair say that the definition that was articulated regarding at least the Houston MPO was in fact applied to TxDOT and those project regional point roadways. If we add this aspect to it, is that atypical for an MPO? And if so, does it need clarity, or does it still fit into what you're looking at? Because it sounds like what Councilman and Woman Alter was saying was that in her own discussions, you had a different discussion regarding optimization than what she understood that actually to mean in practicality and reality.
So, council member, this is Ashby. I wouldn't call our definition the industry standard. I would say it's unique to us. If you look at how different MPOs handle this, you will see wide variability across the country. Some of us have much older systems than others. For example, the roads in New York State are much older, and the transit systems are much older than what we have. And a lot of their focus is on preservation of that existing system and operations, and less so on capital, new added capacity. Ours in particular, well, I'll go to Houston and Dallas for now. Their roadway network and their transit systems are also much older than ours. And if you look at pavement condition, and Tucker can speak to this, if you look at pavement condition in our region, it's actually pretty good. It's actually one of the highest in the state. A lot of our system is new. The portions that are old are about to be redone as part of the I-35 project, because most of that roadway is very old. So when we go in and we do a major reconstruct project like that, we also fix the old underlying issues, because we can't leave an obsolete system in place when we go back in with federal money. So you will see a wide variability across the country. It just depends on what's going on in that particular region.
Chair Long, could I speak for a second?
Councilmember Kitchen.
Yeah, you had talked earlier about what your concerns were, and I just want to say that that I'm not talking about here changing anything about whether something is regionally significant or not. That's not what this is about. This is just about system preservation. So whatever system preservation applies to, like Councilmember Alter was saying, this would apply to. So if we're only applying system preservation to regionally significant roads, this would not change that. Because I understand what your concern is. Your concern is not to open up or change what we're thinking in terms of regionally significant roads. And I don't see this as doing that.
My concern is the rest of the region supporting the maintenance of local jurisdictions who haven't funded it properly. And I'm not pointing to any particular jurisdiction, but that's my concern. But unless anybody else has any other questions, let's go ahead and vote on this.
Commissioner Long, if it's close and the votes of Commissioner Eckhart and Mayor Adler matter, I'd like to wait till vote then. But if their votes don't matter, we can go ahead and keep the vote.
Well, we're going to keep moving. And so on the amendment proposed by, I believe, Councilmember Kitchen made the motion and Councilmember Alter seconded it on changing the definition of system preservation. If all in favor of that motion, please, I'm going to do a roll call vote. So
can she read that again, please? Read the language that's being proposed.
The current language says use operations, comma, ITS and optimization techniques to expand the useful life cycle of the multimodal system elements. The proposed change is to strike optimization and say capital rehabilitation and reconstruction techniques. So it would read use operations, comma, ITS, and capital rehabilitation and reconstruction techniques to extend the useful life cycle of the multimodal system elements.
Madam Chair, did they accept your friendly amendment, or is that not included in this
They
motion?
did not. So we're voting on what, if you look at your backup from Ashby, it's on page 67 that he sent out on Friday. All in favor of this amendment, Councilmember Kitchen,
Yes, and I have the mayor's proxy.
Allison Alter. Beckett. Marty.
No.
Eckhart is not here. Ferguson.
Yes.
Flanagan.
No.
Houston.
No.
Jones.
No.
Matea.
Yes.
Mitchell.
Yes.
Morgan. Morgan.
No.
Oakley.
No.
Ross.
No.
Shay.
Yes.
Terrio.
No.
Pavilion.
Yes.
Van Arsdale.
No.
And the chair votes no.
Chairman Long, I've got the proxy for yes.
Was that submitted before the meeting?
I don't have record of it.
It has to be submitted before the start of the meeting. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in favor and 10 against. So the motion fails.
So Commissioner Long, I have a different count.
Okay, maybe, okay. Oh, sorry, I have 11. 1, 2, 3.
I have 9 in favor and 11 against.
Right, I had one marked incorrectly. So that motion fails. And the City of Austin has.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I have a different count. I have a different
Madam
count.
Chair, I'd call the question on the first motion.
Okay, yeah. So the people I had against the motion were Long, Beckett, Darty, Hill, Houston, Jones, Morgan, Oakley, Ross, Terrio, and Van Arsdale. That's 11.
Chair, I'm not disputing that there's, I would just asked, I show 10-4, not 9. So Ashby, I didn't know if you caught the fact that I was.
Eckhart is not voting. There's only 21 members, so we can only have 20 votes.
Council member, I did count you twice because I showed you as having Adler's proxy.
Okay.
All right. So that motion fails. But I believe the City of Austin has another recommended or another amendment they would like to propose. That's on, I believe, starts on page 68 of the email that Ashby sent to you all on Friday.
Yes, and I'll speak to that. First off, I'm making this as direction. So rather than putting it into the document, so I would make a motion that we approve it as direction. So I'll wait for a second and then I'll speak to it.
I'll second it. Councilmember Alter, second.
There's a motion by Councilmember Kitchen and a second by Councilmember Alter.
Okay, let me speak to it. What this is direction to ask our staff to begin working on an update to the 2045 RTP that speaks to additional environmental strategies. So basically, it's asking our staff to go back as part of our regular update process to create an inventory of environmental strategies. And that would come back to the policy board to consider at some point in the future. The A, B, and C are examples of the types of mitigation strategies that the staff might bring back to us. One of them, actually, B, has already been included in our 2045 plan, and that one is the one that relates to the Hill Country Conservation Roadway designation. So we'd be speaking, and again, these are just examples. A and C are just examples. For example, one of them has to do with climate change metrics. Another example has to do with land conservation goals and metrics that may reflect what our particular jurisdictions are involved in. So let me just say that the RTP plan does acknowledge, very importantly, acknowledges our environmental mitigation objectives in a couple of places. So for example, our goals, public health goal number J, natural environment goal number K, speaks to avoiding, minimizing, and mitigating negative impacts to water and air quality. And then goal J speaks to water quality protection. And then we also have language on 26 about environmental considerations that speaks to the importance of environmental mitigation. So I see this as just a next step for our policy board through our normal update process, not creating a new update process, but through our normal update process to dive a little bit deeper on environmental mitigation, as some other communities have done. And so, for example, that would just get into what is appropriate for us to speak to in more detail about, greenhouse gas emissions or climate change metrics. What is there? How can we reflect what our various jurisdictions might be doing around land conservation goals and metrics? So again, those are just examples. We have good, what I would call starting language in our plan right now, but I don't think that it gets all the way to mitigation. There's some good language as pointed out for us in the backup to what was sent out to you, that there is language in the regional arterials concept inventory that speaks specifically to a pattern book. And so that does some work for us about things like aesthetics, low impact development and scenery around roadway design. So that's helpful. But what's in the plan that right now doesn't get us all there in terms of environmental mitigation. And so I think as part of our normal update process, that this would be useful for our staff to begin working on. And so I would like to just say my understanding of our normal update process, and I can ask Ashby to speak to this, but is that we have an update process in the fall, we have an update process in the spring. So this would depend on the time frame that it would need to be developed and when the staff would be ready to bring it back. The staff could certainly do some more scoping as to what it would cover, but the reason we're bringing this is to recognize the importance of environmental mitigation to our plan, to recognize that we've made a start in our plan right now, but to recognize that there's more to be done around environmental mitigation strategies, and to say that we've got a normal update process. Let's say to our staff that let's start that process. We can work with our staff, with Ashby, on what the scope of that might be, how long that might take, and when it might be brought back to us. This doesn't specify any of that. It just expresses the intent of the policy board that this is a level of consideration that we think is important from a policy standpoint for our staff to do. So let me just ask Ashby, am I understanding correctly that that our normal update process is like we have our next one would be in September and October of this year, and then there'd be another one in the spring, and that we normally do an update process in the fall and the spring. Is that correct?
That's correct, Vice Chair.
Okay. And you and I had a conversation about this and talked about some kinds of things that we could consider around climate change.
So, Councilmember Kitchen, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
And ask that if you're asking that a direction happen, that we're talking about adopting the 2045 plan right now, not future direction for future updates. And so, and since the policy board did not get this information to even look at from you until Friday, I'm asking that we put this on the next at the June agenda for discussion before we vote on it today, since this is not applicable to the 2045 plan. It's just a request to consider things in a future plan update. I'm not sure that that's in order for this particular agenda item right now.
Okay, I understand your question. What I would want to do is be able to put it on the June agenda, and I would want to be able to work with Ashby on scoping it and thinking in terms of what makes sense from a timeline perspective. So we could take the time between now and June to put some more detail around this and bring it back in June. If we can make a commitment right now to bring it back in June and actually and put it on the June agenda, I'm happy to do that. That would give us time.
We will put this on the June agenda for a discussion item to consider directing staff in that area. But I think this is not in order for what we're talking about today, but we will put it on the June agenda.
For discussion and action, right? For discussion
and possible action for the June agenda.
And Madam Chair, can I clarify a question when we're done with this discussion?
So will you, I'm going to consider your motion withdrawn for this particular agenda item as it doesn't relate to updating the plan.
Chair, I'd like to let I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm thinking we're talking about a path, but I'd like to hear what other board members might want to say about that path.
Council member, with all due respect, we're trying to get the 2045 plan as presented today. And I've made a commitment that it'll be on the June agenda as it relates to this topic. So let's go ahead and move on.
Chairman, I object. We have not gotten the completed document, but until a very brief period of time before this meeting. And if we have no opportunity to really discuss it, but you're pushing for us to adopt it, I think that, I'm sorry, I object to that process.
Commissioner, I'm talking specifically about the agenda or the amendment that was brought by Councilmember Kitchen, not anything else.
Okay.
Exactly.
Here's what I'll do.
I'll talk about update plans, and that's not germane to the agenda item. I think we need to move forward with the agenda item.
Okay, Chair, I'll work with Ashby in the meantime.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'll assume that amendment recommendation was withdrawn.
Question I'd like to ask staff.
I'm sorry, is that Commissioner Shea? I'm sorry, who had the question? I couldn't tell.
When yes.
Commissioner Shea. Go ahead, Commissioner Shea.
So let me just understand the process. So you're taking amendments and now, and then will there be an opportunity for general discussion after the amendments?
Yeah, Yes, but the only amendment so far that's been presented in writing was from the city of Austin. The first one failed and the second one has been withdrawn.
But I'm just trying to understand the process. So we're going through amendments first, and then there'll be a time for discussion?
Yes, on the full plan, but there's a motion already on the floor to adopt the 2045 plan as presented. And then there was a motion and a second by Judge Eckhart for a TDM topic. We have not yet voted on that one. We moved on to the other two amendments. The first one failed and the second one was withdrawn. So that's all that I have in terms of amendments that have been recommended at this point. So we will go back.
I had asked for a clarification on where I would find the TDM policy definition in the document that was presented to us to review, and I have not heard back from Ashby, who was going to check with his staff on where it was added.
Yes, it's in two places. It's in the TDM, in the section where we talk about the TDM plan. So I believe that's in Chapter 2, the unconstrained needs section, and then we also added the definition to the policy section, which is towards the end of the document.
Can you give me specific pages, because I have not been able to find it where I would have thought it was logically.
Yes, I'll get the page numbers over to Ashby and we'll get those to you.
I have to vote.
Share them with the rest of the board.
Yes.
We need those now, so we can all look at it and verify. Commissioner Long, this is Jane Houston. I've got a question and a possible motion to amend whenever you're ready to take on a new topic.
Go ahead, Mayor Houston.
My question is, are all of the appendices in Chapter 8 considered part of the plan as things that would be implemented?
Yes, ma'am, they are.
Okay, then here's my question. In Chapter 8, it has the regional arterials concept inventory, formerly known as the regional arterial study. And at the November 9th meeting last year, the study was not adopted as a study or a plan. We agreed to call it a concept inventory and we did not vote on it. So my question is, how does that fit in if we've got something that we said it's going to be in an inventory and it's not a plan? We're not looking to implement everything on there, but now it's in the 2045 RTP as an appendix to be implemented. So I need some clarification and I need to know how to make an amendment to see the links are not there yet, and I understand that, but I don't see where that's going to, when we discussed it in November, I believe there was supposed to be a forward or a preamble put on the regional arterials concept inventory. I don't know about that. I've got questions on this one.
Yes, ma'am. So on the studies that were done, you are correct that the regional arterials concept inventory was not a vote by the board. The board received it, is the wording that was used. And so what we did, and this is what we did with the rest of the studies that also went to the TAC and went to the board. Those studies served as background for the basis of the 2045 plan. So there are projects that are listed in each of those individual studies, but that doesn't mean that those projects are included as part of the constrained list of the 2045 plan. For that to happen, a local government had to submit a project out of there for that to move forward and be considered as part of the constrained list. So
I understand that, but I think for a plan that we did not accept, and if that had come to a vote, I'm not sure which way that vote would have gone, but I think it could have gone as a no. For that plan to now be, for that concept inventory to now be in the list of appendices to look like a plan, and we're saying every one of the appendices is part of the plan, I've got some concerns.
Yes, ma'am. So Ashby, is it possible, because I do remember some concerns regarding that particular Pflugerville, and you walk me through MOCAN and everything else along with that. Do we need to have that in there, or can we put a pin with it regarding a reference? Can we denote it specifically per se, so it's described as such, or how would we be able to make that known so future Campo boards don't look back and say, "Oh, wait, this is what we had here. What's going on here?"
Yeah,
So
I'm in agreement. I'm not so much saying don't put it in there, but let's label it what it is and not say all the things in the appendices are plans that we're looking to implement.
Yes, ma'am, we can do that.
How will we do that? And tell me what motion to make sure that that happens right out at this meeting, so we don't leave a whole lot up in the air.
So I think it's probably best, Mayor, to denote that somewhere towards the front of the document so people see it, but also denote it again where the appendices start.
I think that would be excellent. What wording do I need to put in an amendment to make that happen? And if we've got something else to go on with for the moment, while maybe the attorney looks at something or one of your staff members looks at it and sends me something to, or I'll make a motion later. Commissioner Long, I'm fine to put a pin in this for a few minutes while someone works on that.
So the document is titled inventory. Would it suffice to say in some of the header part of that inventory that said that this document was not voted on by I can't remember when we did that, but it was last fall.
It was November 4th.
Just say this was not voted on by the Campo Policy Board in November of 2019, but is included for illustration purposes or something like that.
I think just saying that this originally a study was accepted by the board for inventory purposes only. Please note it's not a plan, and just make that notation where Mr. Johnson stated, I think is fine. I'm desperately looking for that spot right now. So that's why I said I'm happy to set this aside for a moment while you give me a little bit to look for it. If you want to.
The only other item is set aside as well. So on this particular one, if in the appendix as it relates to the regional arterial inventory, if you state something, Mayor Houston, would you repeat what you said, please?
To note that this was accepted as an inventory only and not a plan, and it's in here for informational and data or something.
Informational purposes. How about that?
That's fine.
Okay, that's a motion by Mayor Houston. Is there a second to that motion?
Second by Oakley.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second on an amendment to the plan as stated by Mayor Houston. It would at a minimum reside in the appendix where that plan is, or where that inventory is, excuse me. All in favor of that motion?
Chairman Long, I have a question before we move to a vote.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Commissioner Shea. I support this idea because, as I recall, there was a lot of unhappiness from a lot of the members about this plan, which was why we literally voted to change the name and call it a concept. But if it's put in the plan, even with this disclaimer, I'd like to hear from staff what function will it serve in the plan? Because as I recall, again, there was a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction with it. The discussion. Actually, Judge, okay, I thought I remembered you were unhappy with some part of it. But anyway, a question to Ashby: what function will it serve if it's in the plan with this disclaimer?
So is there, Commissioner, as a resource of information for local governments that want to use things like the pattern book, where it shows different cross sections of roadways, and it's also there there was some analysis that was done about, for example, putting what we'll call HOV lanes on some of the FMRM roads and using that for transit. So it will be there for the informational purposes, but the projects that are listed in there cannot move forward unless a local government actually submits them, and the board would have to approve it.
And I do recall, Ashby, when we were submitting our concerns, because Travis County had a long list of concerns when this was called an arterial study, about proposals for roads that would have gone through our preserve land, our federally endangered mitigation land, and one road in particular would have come down on top of a well-established neighborhood in Steiner Ranch and would have cut through traffic from 620 through the middle of Steiner Ranch. That, my understanding is that some of those concerns were not all rectified in this document. I think that Steiner Ranch help me remember, was that Steiner Ranch cut-through road removed from the plan? I think.
Commissioner Shea, we didn't make any of those changes. And that's why we said there's some good stuff in there and there's some stuff in there that we don't want, or certain folks didn't want, people in those areas. And so it was to be able to keep the data that was going to be helpful in the future. So we didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I don't think we made any changes at that time. We just said we're gonna keep this in our inventory for the projects that work, that are likely to get moved forward by the local entity, et cetera. But I don't believe we made any changes. Is that correct, Mr. Johnson?
I'm going to check, Mayor, because I thought we removed, Commissioner, my recollection, we're talking about Murphy Road. And my recollection was that we removed that, but let me double check. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
There were
I don't know that we removed everything that everyone wanted done.
I think that's correct. Yeah, what Mayor Houston is saying, I think, is correct. We did not remove all the things that various communities had objections to. I do think the Murphy Road was removed. So my only concern about keeping it in is that future bodies or local governments understand that not everything that would be on that inventory concept list is supported or approved by Campo. So I don't know if there's a way to somehow add a caution in the language.
Yeah, having it in this document is really concerning to me because we not only stopped it, we had some pretty good controversy, and I'm not sure it would have been adopted on it that night. To have it in the plan is saying some things to the public. It may be easier to just let the staff have that as data and take it off this list entirely of the list of appendices.
I think that would be cleaner.
Mayor Houston, if I could comment on that. I know there, to the point you made a couple of minutes ago, is there are a number of smaller local entities that are using this as the basis of some of their transportation plan. And I think with the language that you proposed in your amendment, that, and to the point Ashby made, that no project can move forward without a local government sponsor of it. And if it is seeking Campo funds, would have to go through this body through some kind of scoring criteria that we would have in the future. So I think leaving it there to allow those entities who are relying on it for a basis of their plan, with the notation that you made in your amendment, probably should satisfy at least the concerns that it was not adopted. Are there any other questions or comments on Mayor Houston's amendment that was seconded by Judge Oakley?
I've got a location for that text, and it would be if this is permissible, in the regional arterials concept inventory document itself, on physical page 6 of the PDF, Roman 5. It starts out executive summary, what concept inventory. we need to just make it clear. The last paragraph says arterials concept inventory includes information that can be used to support the development. I think we just need to make it more clear that this is not adopted, which is the statement that you had to begin with, that it was not adopted by the Transportation Policy Board. It was accepted for information only. And I think if the phrase you had, not adopted by the TPB, I think that would be helpful. And I believe that's the page that it ought to be on at a minimum. Whatever else staff thinks it could be useful, I'm all for it.
All right, so there's a motion by Mayor Houston and a second by Judge Oakley to amend the section of the Regional Arterials Concept Plan to indicate that this was not adopted by the Policy Board, but is there for information only.
Yes, ma'am, and that would put it out
Chair
there
Long?
for the document, so that at any time this document is found, whether it's part of the 45 plan or not, that will be very clear. So thank you for helping me with the wording, Commissioner Long.
Okay, all right.
Commissioner Long, I have a question on this. I appreciate the point that Mayor Houston was making, but I wanted to note that on page 18 of the RTP, there's a whole page about the concept inventory, and I know you had said it was at a minimum in the appendix, but I think a similar notation needs to be made on page 18 where it's discussed within the plan.
Page.
Have wording for it, but page 18
Physical.
says Regional Arterials Concept Inventory. This is of the 2045 plan.
I'm looking at it on page 18 and I'm not seeing that.
Okay, that's the one that I had.
I'm looking at the one that the system label was 04-20-2020 draft 2045 plan.
Yeah, it's the same document.
Looking at the one that was with the memo from Ashby. It is.
That wasn't the staff's, that was what came from Ashby, and I think what you're looking at was the markup that came from Bill Bunch in that memo. So Councilmember Alter, you need to look at the one that's on the link that was provided most recently.
All right, well then I will look at that one.
Yeah, I'm looking at the actual plan.
Can I ask for clarification? Are there references to the Regional Arterials Concept Inventory document elsewhere in the 2040 plan? Because if there are, I think that this language that's a cautionary language needs to be included everywhere there's a reference. And I would like to know from staff if there are other references in the plan to this.
I just hit 4 and I'm still searching.
Okay, so if Mayor Houston, if your motion is to include that in the appendix, but also to say not adopted, but for informational purposes, each time it's referenced, I think that covers your concern. Is that correct?
I think it does. And on page 32 of the draft plan as of today, there is it's physical page 32 of the PDF. It's Regional Arterials Concept Inventory. And I think it needs to be on that page. There's a lot of references. I don't know if it needs to be everywhere, but it certainly needs to be on this page 32.
Okay, so page 32 and in the appendix where it's referenced.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a vote on this item.
Can I just, I thought you'd said, Mayor Houston, that you found 4 citations in the document. I just want to make sure that everywhere it's included, there's clear language with that caution.
Commissioner Shea, we will go back and do a search and replace.
Thank you.
It's in there 12 times according to my PDF search. It
should be
appropriate
added
everywhere. A couple of them are table of contents. But yes, it needs to be clear that
everywhere where it's applicable, and Mayor Houston, I'm going to count on you to get that to staff and work with them on that.
Okay.
All right. So is there anyone against this amendment? I'll ask again, anybody against this amendment? Okay, so I'm going to assume that everyone is in favor of this amendment.
Madam Chair,
Being absent.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I am in favor of the amendment. I would only ask that when we are making changes, specifically changes of direction, changes in policy, that we at least redline these changes so that we can document and identify what has been changed and how one can find it, so that we have an appendix of changes that we can track systematically.
I agree.
All right, noted, Commissioner Trevilian, this is the only thing so far we've voted to change. All right, so I'm going to go back to the proposed amendment on TDM that was made earlier. And I think from a Robert's Rules perspective, I'd like to have somebody make that motion again, because I think we jumped on to other things. And so I'd like to make that motion again in a second so we can vote on that one.
And I will make that motion. And I understand, Chairman Long, that Judge Eckhart has communicated with you. I have been her designated proxy in writing when those requests were made. And she has asked you to apply some consideration, given that we are in a time of emergency, and she is at an emergency press conference in COVID-19, and ask that I be allowed to function as her. So the motion would be
making the motion again, Commissioner Shea.
I am remaking the motion since she is not able.
Is there somebody that wants to second that motion? And restate the motion, please.
It is acknowledging the motion that was made and approved unanimously by the TPP last September. And I'll read from the minutes. Mr. Long moved for approval of the inclusion of the newly approved TDM policy in the draft 2045 RTP, and that passed unanimously. It was seconded by motion. Sure that full TDM policy is included in the 2045 plan as we unanimously voted direction to staff.
I don't think it had a percentage tied to it.
The staff presentation that was made that day and what was voted on did not have a percentage applied to it at that time.
That was separate. I think Councilmember Kitchen was citing a different item on that agenda that referenced the TDM plan. This motion was on the TDM policy.
I believe if Ashley, did you say that those items have been included in the plan? Is that what you have presented? Is that what's on the screen here right now?
We did go back and add the language about the definitional changes that was presented, one by Judge Eckhart, but also came out of the TDM plan. Since the TAC, we have added that language in.
And that needs to be added still. My understanding is it was just the definition that was added, but it's the additional items as amended by the TAC needs to be included, as that was part of Judge Eckhart's item that she brought, and it was in the backup for that meeting, and that was what we voted on.
Ashby, this Mayor Morgan. Yes, so if I'm looking correctly, it's on page 33. Is that where it talks about all this?
If going back to Councilmember Alter's question, on pages 32 and 37.
Say that again, Ashby, 32 and 27?
37, Commissioner.
That's the
32 and 37?
Yes, ma'am.
It's 77.
Is it 77?
Yes.
Could you please restate what pages this is found on? And perhaps it would be most useful to tell us what is included there. My understanding is it was just the definition of TDM, not the full document that Judge Eckhart had included.
Would you go ahead and respond to Commissioner?
It's the definition. That's what we were instructed to add by tax. So it's the definition of TDM. It's on pages 32 in the TDM plans summary area, and then on page 77 in the policies.
But it's not just the definition. It's the 3 additional policy items.
Commissioner, we're showing a different thing. When we went back and watched the video, we didn't see that there was a vote on those.
It was in the item that we were voting on. And are you saying that you didn't see a vote on it at all? Or you didn't see somebody completely recite the entire information of what was in the item that was in the backup that we were voting? What is it you're saying you didn't see when you went back? Because we've gone back and have found the documentation. So I'm not understanding what you're saying you didn't see.
Okay, Commissioner, let me ask Nirav to address this because he watched the video. I did not. So if we can unmute Nirav then.
If I could ask that everybody else on the call who's not speaking, please mute your microphone. We're getting a lot of feedback. Or if our moderator could go ahead and mute everybody except Nirav right now, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Board. This is Nirav Zed, Campo South. So we put in the policy on page 33 and 77. Page 77 is the policy table that lists all of the policies. In regard to the established target and coming back for additional points, our staff understanding of the motions as they were read in the minutes was that the board would later on establish targets and would also provide direction on what they were looking for in terms of avoiding double counting and the TIP scoring criteria. That is my understanding of the facts.
I'm pulling up the minutes and the documentation and the packet from the meeting. There were 2 separate items. One was agenda item 8, the other was agenda item 9. And some of the discussion around both the percentage and the how we count these CDs, the transportation development credits, was in item that we did direct staff to come back with the transportation development credits, but that was separate from the rest of the TDM policy.
Yes, ma'am, I recall that. And so in relation to the transportation development credits, I think we addressed that in the TDM plan. I'll let Nirav speak to that in a minute. But
I'm just saying is if people are recalling that from the discussion, that was separate from the rest of the policy that we voted on.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to clarify it so people don't get, stuck trying to figure out what happened with that discussion on the transportation development credits. That was taken out separately.
Okay, this is Nirav again. In regards to transportation development credits, the only discussion really surrounding that was whether TDM was eligible activity for TDC. And it's always been an eligible
I'm
activity.
sorry, I can't understand the person who's speaking. Can you get either closer to a microphone or I'm not sure why you're muddy.
How about now?
That's a little clearer.
Now?
So
Clearer. What were you saying?
I believe he was saying, Nirav, let me see if I heard you. I think what I heard you say is that The discussion was whether TDCs could be used for TDM projects.
Yes, ma'am.
And
I have the exact language from the minutes, so let me just read them and help, maybe this will clarify it. Judge Eckhart moved for approval of the TDM policy as amended by the TAC with assurance that Campo staff will bring back the issue of transportation development credits in advance of the next call. So that was set aside separately for staff to bring back. That motion passed unanimously. Then the meetings say that Commissioner Long moved for approval of the inclusion of the newly approved TDM policy in the draft 2045 RTP. That also passed unanimously. And it wasn't just the definition of TDM, it was the additional items in the policy.
it did not include a target. My motion motion that day did not include a target.
If I may, Ashby or Madam Chair, what precludes us from, going forward with this plan and putting a pin and having staff directed to go ahead and review and create a target? Something done here.
So, I can't remember, Councilmember Matei, if you were on the policy board at that time or not. Were you? I can't remember when you joined. Sorry.
He wasn't.
Okay. There was robust discussion about a target because if I recall, then it's okay, is there a target? And then you start having targets for so many things that it makes it very difficult. But there are TDM components of that can get extra scoring criteria or scoring points in our scoring criteria. In fact, there's a separate category. So I think the issue, and if you go back and look, most of the projects, especially some in the more urban areas, definitely had TDM components. And we probably, in our last call, would have easily exceeded 5%. And so we've shied away from putting targets on specific things because it then creates unintended consequences in other places, is from my perspective. But the policy language, and there was a couple of charts that I remember as part of the presentation that evening that were aspirational things about TDM that we discussed and supported, but my motion, because my position hasn't changed, and my motion for that would not have included a target at that point in time.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm going to call the question on this amendment motion.
Okay, so the question has been called, and I believe under Robert's rules, that's not up for discussion. We have to vote on whether to call the question or not. So,
But Madam Chair, I feel I need to correct the record. The discussion about the targets.
There's no discussion. There's no
so
discussion.
Commissioner Shea, when
That's on the table is incorrect.
Commissioner Shea, according to Robert's rules, when the question has been called, we have to vote on that, and it's not up for discussion. So you're voting right now as to whether to end discussion on this particular proposal, and it's related to Commissioner Shea's motion on TDM. Okay, so I'm going to go through the list. Councilmember Kitchen.
I'm voting no, and I'm voting the mayor also.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Alter. This is only
on the whole plan.
No, this is only voting to call the question on this amendment.
No.
Commissioner Beckett.
And could you remind everybody to mute if they're not talking?
Yes, please, there's a lot of background. If you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. Commissioner Darty.
Absolutely.
Okay. Tucker Ferguson.
Yes.
Flanagan. Hill. Houston.
No, and this takes a 2/3 majority to pass.
Jones.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh. Mitchell.
Yes.
Morgan.
Yes.
Oakley.
Yes.
Ross. Hey. No. Terrio.
Yes.
Civilian.
No.
Barksdale.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Council, Tim, can you, is it take a simple majority or a super majority to call the question?
It takes 2/3. This is Houston. I just pulled my book out.
I'm asking our council.
I'm unaware of any requirement of a 2/3 majority for a question to be called.
I have.
Me neither. My experience is majority.
No, any motion to take away the right of a member always takes 2/3.
This
There's
is.
no right,
Go ahead, council.
with respect, there's no right being taken away from
The
any
right to
member.
speak.
All
Yes.
all the members have rights to vote on this item.
We're taking away their right to speak on this item. It's in my Robert's rules right here. This has always been the case.
Yeah, a vote to call the question ends debate. It's taking away the right of discussion.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that. I will, if you want to go on.
Hope I'm showing the right
Chair,
section.
If you want to go on, Madam Chair, to the rest of this item, let me check this item. I'm not aware of any. I don't want to be dismissive. I don't want to be dismissive of Mayor Houston. So let me check this item if you want to go on with further.
Madam Chair, if I may, is it possible for us to just assign staff to revisit this issue? We can do it in an update for the next meeting, or do we have to come to a conclusion on this now?
I think we have to come to a conclusion today. It certainly, if it doesn't get resolved right now, it certainly can be part of our amendment process and resolved then. But if we don't vote on the plan today, we will have a stale plan and projects that.
Oh, my apologies. I wasn't speaking about the plan and the totality of the plan, just a specific aspect.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So if this item doesn't get resolved, it certainly can come back as a part of our amendment process. I'm sorry. I thought you were speaking to the whole plan.
No, not at all.
Chair Long, I'd like to sit. Chair, I'd like to sit.
Hold on. I'm asking a question. Madam Chair.
I couldn't hear you.
When's the closest time that we can have that discussion? Because clearly there's, a lot of information out there that says we adopted this policy, and then as Commissioner Shea read it, it says as amended. So what does that mean? What was amended to it? So what's the soonest we can address this in an amendment?
The amendment, we have a fall amendment cycle of our plan, and we will be able to address any amendments necessary or that the policy board agrees to put forward in the fall. There's 2 cycles each year. There's a fall and a spring cycle.
So, Chair Long, could I speak for a moment?
Councilmember Kitchen.
I think that what have suggestions that have been made by the last 2 speakers, I think are good suggestions, but I don't think we need to wait until the fall. What I would suggest is at this point, we just ask staff to clarify this issue. And the issue, what I'm hearing is the issue is what was exactly adopted back in September policy board. And what I'm hearing is that we're wanting to reflect what was adopted in this plan. So if we spend some time, if we can ask staff to go back and clarify, then we can bring that back to the June policy board meeting if necessary, if we continue to have a disagreement with what was actually adopted. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that that we give direction to the staff to put into the RTP what was adopted in September. If we have some disagreement over what was adopted, that we address that disagreement in June.
So I don't know from a practical perspective, council member, because we have to vote today on the plan or it becomes a stale plan.
I don't want to change that.
Right. The June meeting, we could certainly discuss it, but we will not, in order to rectify anything related to this topic, it would have to be through that fall amendment cycle.
Why is that?
Because that's our process of updating the plan. There's public involvement and various aspects of updating the plan.
Yeah, I guess I'd be considering this more like a correction, because we do have a process as we determine that things may have been missed or needed to be added as a correction, because I don't think we're talking about, if we were talking about adding something related to TDM that the policy board did not vote on, then yes, I can see that through the update process. But if we're simply talking about adding to the RTP what was voted on in September, then I would think of that more as a correction.
I think the challenge is folks are not clear on what was voted on in September, and it appears that staff isn't either. If I could ask once again, if your microphone is not muted, please mute it.
Commissioner Long, it's Judge Eckhart. May I be recognized?
Yes, welcome back.
My apologies for having to step away. I would like to advocate for what Councilmember Kitchen lays out. We did vote to include a transportation demand policy in September. The fact that there is confusion is unfortunate, yet under stare decisis, it has been decided by this policy board that the transportation demand management policy be in the 2045 plan. I think it is a reasonable approach to say it's in there and staff has to put it in there. It's concerning to me that we even have to have that vote since we already had it. Perhaps Mr. Tuggy could describe the term stare decisis to this board.
The question was called in your, before you rejoined. He's researching a Robert's rules for us right now. And
if this board can ignore votes, previous votes of its own, then we have no planning.
So,
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr. Tuggy.
yes. I'd like to address Judge Eckhart's point, but before I do that, I've gone back and double checked on the Roberts Rules question. Indeed, we've got a 2/3 vote requirement on calling that question.
Okay.
Second, with respect to the question of stare decisis, I think Judge Eckhart is correct. The question really here, I don't think there's any question in the record that you all voted in favor of this TDM policy adoption. The question is, what was the underlying data with respect to a specific target? And I'm hearing, I don't know, I don't have personal recollection of that. It sounds to me like there's a question in the staff of, in the mind of staff of what actually, the chair seems to have a different recollection. There seems to be a question about what or whether a target was adopted, not a question about, and Judge Eckhart's correct, a policy was adopted. There's no question about that. It should be in the plan, in my mind.
So here's,
So I would suggest adopting all that is not in question. The only thing that I'm given to understand that is in question is whether the 5% target was voted. That seems to be the only matter in contention here.
That's correct. That's correct.
So we are going to vote on the
Chairman Long, can I have real quick?
Yeah.
To Judge Eckhart's part, here's my only concern, and I don't disagree with if there was a TDM policy voted on, but even in the minutes, it says as amended. We need to find out what was it as amended to, and it may just be the percentage amount. I don't know. But I think that's the crucial question is, yes, there was a TDM policy vote, but it says in the minutes itself as amended. What was that amendment or how was it?
And Mayor, you know as well as I that is what minutes are for. And that it is at that moment when you vote a policy that the best notes are the contemporaneous notes. The only contemporaneous notes we have very clearly lay out a 5% target. But I am even conceding to that in a hope of moving us forward. If we're going to throw out the entirety of the vote because of a convenient failure of memory that is being continued by this staff, there is no planning if we have votes that are,
if I may,
to our work product.
So here's, there was a policy voted on, and I would not, I made the motion, and the discussion around the target was a specific number was removed, and I think that's probably what was amended and why I supported it then. I did not then and still don't support a target, so I think that's consistent. And the
and you did, and I completely expected you not to support a set aside. And so the conversation was around whether it was a set aside or a target, and we conceded to a target because then that would be soft.
There was some discussion, I believe, to have, and I don't know whether it was a specific group or who it was to bring that back. And that apparently didn't occur. And we all voted on the minutes the next month. So shame on the whole board for approving the minutes if they were not complete to our satisfaction. So I don't think it's fair to beat up on staff because we're the ones that approved the minutes. We should have insisted that the right things were in there.
That's fine with me. Then put to the 2025 plan all that is not in contention. The only thing I hear that is in contention is the 5% target.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Mayor Morgan.
Judge, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't adopt the TDM, so I want to make that clear. I mean, if the policy was voted on, I just want it to be the correct thing that we voted on to be in there. And if I'm assuming these meetings are recorded, as much as contemporaneous notes would be great, a video will never lie. And so we ought to be able to go back and find that information as well.
We watched the video, man.
Okay.
So the Commissioner Shea's motion, and now I don't remember who seconded it, but it was to include the voted on TDM policy from the September 2019 meeting, and we will get clarity on that policy to include, but it does not include a 5% target.
Is that good with you, Judge? I tried to capture the gist of your amendment. If you want to further, I'm happy to consider any further change you'd want.
I'm very sorry that I had to step away so that I could not be further, more deeply engaged in this this deliberation. If that's the motion, then that's the motion.
Okay. I believe.
Can I just clarify?
Seconded, and I would be happy to. I think Commissioner Shea and I both would accept a friendly amendment. Commissioner Judge
Friendly
Eckhart, if you
amendment
want to
or
change it.
withdrawal. Yeah, or withdrawal, Judge, if you want to make a separate motion.
And that Campo staff will bring back within the month a clarification on an appropriate target for consideration by the policy board in order to clarify, to clear up the failure of record.
So, Judge, we're trying to vote on the amendment to the plan right now, not a future direction to staff. So
it's not a future direction to staff. It was an old direction to staff that was never followed up on.
So I'm trying to
of the 2045 plan. And here we are on the day we're voting it. This is not planning.
We hear your comments. I'm trying to get us to a place where we can vote on this. And I believe if the motion made by Commissioner Shea and seconded by Councilmember Alter includes the policy board vote on TDM policy from September of 2019, but it did not include a 5% target. I think that's what was voted on then, to the best of my recollection as the maker of that motion in 2019.
And Madam Chair, this doesn't preclude us from directing staff to go and look at something appropriate, not necessarily a percentage per se, but a way to capture that % in future projects, correct? We can tell staff.
We can do that in the same way we did Councilmember Kitchen's recommendation, give those directions, yes, at the June meeting. So if I understand it, the motion on the floor, once again, is to amend the plan to include the TDM policy, and there's some definitions already in there, but to include the bulk of the policy minus the 5% target. There's a motion and a second. All in favor of that motion? We'll go through. Councilmember Kitchen.
I'm voting yes. I don't know if Mayor Adler's back or not. If he's not, I'm voting yes for him also.
Okay. Councilmember Alter.
Yes.
Beckett. Aye. Doherty.
To be consistent, Chairman, I think that I voted against this in September. I would like to know that, but just to be consistent, because I've always had a problem with some of the things with TDM, and I'm trying to stay out of this. I mean, as ridiculous as it is, but if it was passed, I mean, and I know I remember us talking about this. So
the notes show the vote was unanimous, Gerald.
Is that a yes or a no, Doherty?
Yes.
Eckhart.
Steve's here, and I'm voting yes.
We got you as a yes. Eckhart, yes.
Yes.
Houston,
Yes.
Flanagan,
Yes.
Hill,
No.
Houston,
Aye.
Jones,
Yes.
Matea,
Yes, ma'am.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Morgan,
Yes.
Oakley,
Yes.
Ross. Kay,
Yes.
Terrio,
Yes.
Trevilian,
Yes.
and Arsdale.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we have, everybody is back on the call. We have 20, I vote yes, 24, 1 against. Motion passes. Okay, okay, so now those are there's been 2 amendments that no, wait a minute. Have there been 2? No, there's only been 1 amendment that has been passed, and that's the one that we just voted on. So I'm going to go back to the original motion.
There was an amendment
No.
from Mayor Houston too.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Yes, there was an amendment from Mayor Houston to amend the language on the inventory. So those are the 2 amendments that have passed. So I'll go back to the original motion. And Tim, make sure I'm doing this right. But the original motion was to adopt the plan. That has 2 amendments to it. So the motion on the floor is to adopt the 2045 plan as amended by the 2 that we voted on.
Correct. Correct.
And Madam Chair, you did say there'd be an opportunity for some discussion on this.
Yes. A discussion on what?
On the motion to adopt the plan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the overall plan. Okay, so the motion we are discussing now is the 2045 plan as amended. Is there any discussion?
I have a couple questions for staff.
Second. You have a second? You have a second?
Yes, the motion was made originally, I think, by Ross and Mayor Morgan. Is that right?
Okay.
Okay.
My question, I've got two questions for staff initially. One is, can you identify if there are any areas in this 25-year plan where Campo is addressing climate change? And the reason I'm asking is every group that I'm part of, every regional body virtually that's doing long-range planning is at least trying to look at how climate change would impact their plans. I think we can all agree that the weather is changing and it's having very harmful impacts on the. So if staff could please just speak to if and how climate change is addressed in the document. And I confess, I didn't read the most recent version, and so I'm not up on if something got added.
Kelly, will you address Commissioner Shea's question?
Yes, climate change is not mentioned in the plan specifically. However, throughout the process, we've looked at land use, we've looked at, we have information about air quality. We also have information in the appendices, specifically arterials inventory about land suitability, aquifers on both sides of the region. We look at floodplain, we look at, which also included Atlas 14 in there. We also looked at soil plasticity and a whole host of environmental factors that kind of get to climate change, and specifically us able to look at us with the centers being able to look kind of at some of those efficiencies with land use, specifically around population and jobs and street grid. And so it's not specifically said in there, but if you look at the actions and the recommendations in these studies, it's getting at that.
I'll just say for the record, and maybe this is for a future amendment, I think we've all learned from the pandemic that we've got to be more forward-looking in terms of our long-range planning. Certainly, I would hope that there would be some plan to be looking at how we plan for emergency evacuation, how we plan for what we know will be very serious stress on our transportation system and on our population in this region over the next 25 years. So I just put that out there as a request. I don't know if you have suggestions about how we would address it. Would it be a plan amendment? I know there's been some discussion.
I'm going to
about
bring that, Bridget. I'm going to bring that amendment anyway.
And so that'll be part of the environmental
Yes.
mitigation strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd understood that was a requirement, a federal requirement, that these renewals of these long-range plans include that. So anyway, it concerned me that it's not included, and I'm glad that it will be. Are we also looking at all, or is this only in the TDM section that we discussed previously, at the potential for telecommuting dramatically reducing congestion and being the quickest and cheapest solution we can implement for transportation problems in the region? Is that addressed in any way in the long-range plan?
I'm going to let Nirav speak to the TDM plan specifically.
And so it would only be in the TDM plan?
That analysis, all the detailed analysis that you're talking about, even with the evacuation, is addressed in the arterials inventory. So a lot of the more detailed analysis, especially with environmental work, and some of these specific topics are going to be in these special studies. And that was the beauty of doing these special studies ahead of time, was that we had an opportunity to do more of the detailed analysis, specifically by mode and potentially by action in those studies. So the TDM plan is where a lot of that would be talked about.
The TDM plan or the arterials concept?
The arterials concept is where I was getting at your comment about evacuation. That's in there. The specifics on teleworking are going to be in TDM, and the overall comment is that a lot of the more detailed analysis is going to be in those documents. Some of those documents are really, really long, and that's because they went into so much detailed analysis. So a lot of it is referenced in the plan to look in certain appendices.
And I would just suggest that that's worth a separate discussion with the policy board. All of our communities are affected by the threat of wildfire and flooding, and I think it's worthy of a separate discussion and pulling it out as a separate policy action.
All right, are there any more?
From Nirav? I think Nirav was going to comment on the telecommuting question.
Oh, sorry, I thought we were finished. Go ahead. Nirav, did you have anything else to say?
No, ma'am. Asked by Kelly, spoke everything for both of them.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, the telecommuting would be developed under the TDM plan portion of the long-range plan? Is that what you're saying?
It's already in there, Commissioner Shea.
Well, that's what I was asking. Where is it in the plan?
In the TDM plan or the 2045 draft plan?
Asking about the 2045 plan, which we're about to vote on. I'm just trying to understand if this 25-year plan looks at the potential for telecommuting being an immediate and inexpensive solution to traffic congestion.
If I heard staff correctly, it's in the TDM plan that is being adopted as part of this 2045 plan. So it references the very detailed TDM plan that is incorporated. Did I understand that correctly, Kelly?
Yes, and it's also mentioned. It's also mentioned in the epilogue for COVID-19. It's trying to understand those impacts, and that's in the document now.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Can you give me the references on where those are found, please? Just, I'll finish here in a second. Where is that? It sounds like the COVID-19 is newly added, and also the telecommuting, where is that?
The telecommuting is in the TDM appendices. That's what we were referencing, and I can get you the appendix number for that. The COVID-19 epilogue, I believe, is on the last page before we get to it's page 79, it's the COVID-19 considerations piece. And then as far as the actual appendix for the TDM plan, that is Appendix D. I mean G as in goose.
Got it. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions before we move to a vote? It's just by way of time, it's 4:51 and we have 4 more agenda items.
Chair Long, I have a comment when you're ready.
Go ahead, Councilmember Kitchen.
Okay, I am going to vote for this. I am going to bring, as I said earlier, I'm going to do that because with regard to environmental issues, I think it makes a start. I do think it's sufficient in terms of environmental mitigation strategies, but I do think there's a path through the update process. So I'm going to work between now and June with my colleagues and with Ashby to see if we can bring back something to you all in June that people would be comfortable with, so that we can start down the path of improving or adding environmental strategies that are in the RTP. I also understand that the concerns that I had raised previously, Mr. Johnson, Ashby, for addressing these. The demographic update, we have a path for that. We have a path for addressing the City of Austin brought about the Urban Trails project listing. We have a path to address some concerns that were raised about roads in Hays County, and I appreciate from Mark Jones that there's a process that Hays County is going through to consider those roads. So all in all, I am going to vote for this plan. I'm also appreciative of the fact that we've made the note now that the concept plan, it was not adopted. The regional arterial concept inventory was not adopted as a plan. So, so I think that is important also. So all in all, I'm going to vote for, I think it's important, as others have said, that we have a plan. I consider it a living document. I consider it as something that we can continue. And for those reasons, I'm going to support it.
Thank you. And this is just a reminder, please put, I see a few folks that are not on mute. If you'd mute your microphone when you're not talking, that would help with the background noise. Thank you very much. Are there any more comments before we vote on the plan?
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
this is Mayor Houston.
Yes.
I'm going to vote for the plan because we need to get this done and we need to not have a stable plan. I do have concerns that there wasn't more available early on in the comment process. I'm just going to leave it there, but I do have heard some of the concerns offered by some of the folks who spoke today, and some of those concerns I do share, and I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Are there any?
Commissioner Long.
I'm sorry, I can't.
It's Judge Long. This is Bridget Shea. I just want to make a brief comment. Our staff, our Travis County transportation staff submitted a very detailed comment on the plan. I have had ongoing concerns with processes at Campo, and I have many concerns, as were reflected in our staff memo, about the process for this plan. And the fact that climate change is not addressed specifically in the plan, I think is a real failing. And I will be abstaining on the plan for that and the reasons cited in the TIA and the Travis County letter that was sent.
All right. Any other comments?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I see Councilmember Flanagan. I think, sorry, I scrolled past you, saw your hand up. Go ahead. Thank you.
Chair. Thank you. I have a lot of concerns about the plan. I was part of the subcommittee that attempted to provide some guidance in the beginning. I don't think that guidance was terribly substantive. I still have some pretty significant concerns. And I also waver between we need to vote yes because the plans need to move forward, and this plan is not terribly substantive because it's on the eve of a census. So the data is pretty significantly flawed just because of the timeline that it's based on. The 2050 plan seems to be a much more substantive timeline. Given all of the pandemic and delays and the impact to our economy, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of tax revenue over the next 5 years for additional, or oil and gas revenue for that matter, for additional road construction. So given all of those pieces put together, I will be voting no on the plan.
All right, any other comments?
Yes, Chairwoman Long. It's
Okay.
Eckhart. Did you hear me?
I did. Just to say, we note your complaints from the past. So if there's new comments, we welcome them.
Well, with that kind of welcome, I am well aware that when folks don't get what they want in a political process, they often fall back to arguments that the policy, the process was unfair. I want to say that I am not falling back to that. Actually, everything in the kitchen sink is in this plan. So it's not that folks aren't getting what they want so much, because it's pretty much an undifferentiated list. It is not planning. And it concerns me that even though this is repetitious, you don't want to hear it. It's important that we become a planning organization. So often folks say, I will not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In this instance, I will not let the good be the enemy of the minimally serviceable. And I will vote for the minimally serviceable, and I will stay on the team trying to help us get to a moment where we can actually colorably be described as a planning organization.
Any other comments or questions?
I would like to comment, Commissioner Long.
Go ahead.
So I also served on the subcommittee and very early on raised the issue of the need for this plan to address the environmental. And I appreciate Councilmember Kitchen bringing that forward and the willingness of the board to have that conversation next month. That being said, had we incorporated the environmental into the plan from the get-go, and had we prioritized instead of including everything, I think we would be in a much better position to adapt this plan to the new reality of a COVID-19 or a post-COVID-19 world. So while I appreciate and do believe that this checks the minimal boxes of what we need to go forward with, I'm not going to be able to support this because I believe we should be prioritizing and planning, and I am just not comfortable with where we landed at this time.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
I want to say that I appreciate the conversation and discourse regarding this topic and the plan in itself. I definitely appreciate, especially staff, dealing with a lot of different concerns and issues from a variety of different folks and trying to get things together to try to massage and appreciate and work with all of us regarding these things. Ashby, I thought that your letter that you sent out to us, I think it was on Friday, regarding the issues and concerns that many of us have regarding a post-COVID-19 world and how that fiscal impact as well as that impact does with teleworking and TDM in general. I thought that was really good. I thought that was key. I think that it also shows that we're going to have a longer conversation as we move forward. Additionally, I do appreciate the fact that we're saying this is a living document. So that means we will be able to make amendments. We'll be able to make amendments regarding the environment, regarding TDM, a variety of different things that we want to do moving forward with it. I think that at most, the most important thing to realize is that I don't think anyone's trying to do something where they're trying to undercut, massage, bully, or push out anybody with it as well. I don't think anything was done in an uncouth manner. Indirectly and firstly, not on purpose. And just moving forward, if we go ahead and we go with the thought process that people actually try to do good, and that in fact that when we try to go ahead and get things done, misunderstanding is probably the biggest thing. I think case in point with the TDM thing, I mean, it seems more of a misunderstanding than ignorance. that makes a big difference in how we approach these conversations and honestly how we go ahead and get conclusions on things. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Any other comments from any other policy board members?
Madam Chair.
I think that's Commissioner Trevilian. Is that your voice I hear? Okay, go ahead, sir.
I think that reasonable people can differ. And I think that, we have gone through a process where a lot of people have expressed specific interests that need to be entertained. I think that we put ourselves in a better position of clarity and understanding if we better define our operating procedures for putting briefing papers together. It seems to me that that we should do basic things like all of the motions should be documented. Not only exactly what was said, who made the motion, who seconded the motion, so that we all understand exactly what was there. And if we have any issues with any language, we're able to get that information fairly quickly and give feedback and make comments based on the information that is printed by staff. I think that it is a lack of clarity that or a lack of briefing that sometimes leads to creating disagreements where the disagreements aren't as difficult as they have become. I think putting working paper standards in place, developing standard operating procedures for just reporting the things that we vote on could get us in a place where we're not doing these types of things on the day that we're voting significant plans out. I just think in order to be as productive as we might be, it has to start with the way that we brief each other and document exactly what the interests and intent of our committee members are.
Chairman Long.
Yeah, go. I don't recognize. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mayor.
I'm going to go ahead and vote for this, recognizing that I think this is a huge missed opportunity. I agree with what the judge said and others. We had that strategic planning day where we all got together and there was, I thought, a real support for actually coming up with a top 10 list of projects that we could really focus on and really put our shoulder behind. And this was the opportunity to really do that, to have a planning document which necessarily picked setting priorities. So I'm disappointed that there's a real miss here, and I would like for us to come back and try to revisit that and do a better job of that. It's good we're going to give it real demographic information when we have the census, because we know the demographic. This report is just not right on its face. It's not right. But at the end of the day, I can vote for this because it doesn't really do anything. It has everything in it. It didn't pick priorities. And it's a shame that becomes a reason why you can vote for something. It moves it along. It checks off the process. But as a planning organization, I just think we can do better. And I'm going to vote for this to be part of that group that continues to move us, hopefully in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other comments on this item?
I have one brief one, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Beckett.
I want to say thanks to the staff. I've read through the Regional Transportation Demand Management Plan that I think it was dated in August 2019, particularly those goals. I think it's page 60, 61, 59, part 6, that lays out a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about at length this afternoon. In terms of the goals with regard to TDM, I would just encourage people to review that pretty closely and see what's in this plan with regard to TDM. factually on paper. And, you know, I just appreciate all the hard work. I know it's a touchy subject, but I mean, we haven't learned anything from COVID. It's, you know, that there are some TDM strategies that might actually really work. You know, I see Austin, we're the lowest major city in terms of, you know, population density and percent drive alone. You know, I think we're doing things, and Campo's doing things, and we as local jurisdictions are doing things. A lot of these things in the TDM have been a part of the Clean Air Compact Coalition for a decade or more. You know, I just would encourage members of the board to really study the regional transportation demand management plan that's in this plan. And I don't see how we can't support it. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Beckett. Are there any other comments? All right. My final comment before we vote is also to thank the staff for their hard work. I think sometimes comments probably were inappropriately directed to staff, because at the end of the day, the decisions made and the direction that staff has taken and what they have done have come from this policy board. And if, you know, and we set those things in motion back in 2018, much of what we are including in this plan was voted on by this policy board in 2019. There's been some amendments that have come this year, but the vast majority of the work were those studies and inventories and things like that that led up to this plan. And while the process was different from the way we have done it in the past, it had a robust look at lots of things that were not previously included in our other plans. So I think you know, I hope that our staff is not taking this personally, because it rests with this policy board. And those items and those things that we're passionate about, that's board direction. And so again, I thank the staff for their hard work on this, and for the public for their robust input into it. And so with that, I heard Councilmember Flanagan say he was not going to vote for it. Are there any other no's?
I'm a no. Councilmember Alter's a no.
Okay.
Chairman Long, Commissioner Shea is an abstain.
So Commissioner Shea, are you abstaining or are you voting no?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. Are there any other no votes? So with that, I'm going to say Long, Kitchen, Adler, Beckett, Daugherty, Eckhart, Ferguson, Hill, Houston, Jones, Matea, Mitchell, Morgan, Oakley, Ross, Shea, Terrio, Trevelyan, and Arsdale are yes votes on the 2045 plan.
Not Shea.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
Shea.
you included me in that. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, the motion to adopt the plan with the two amendments passes. It is late in the day. We are going to go back to items number 5 and 6. These are the minutes from the last the two April meetings. I'm going to take those together. Is there a motion on items 5 and 6?
Move to approve.
Second.
Mayor Morgan? Who seconded that?
Rudy.
Okay. Matea seconds. Any discussion? All right. Any opposed to this vote, to this motion? All right. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Item number 7 is discuss and take appropriate action on Campo appointment to the Cap Metro Board.
I'd like
Ashby,
to
if
make a
you
motion. Oh, sorry.
Ashby, if you could introduce this item, and then I'll recognize Councilmember Kitchen for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Campo Board appoints members to the Cap Metro Board, and Mr. Wade Cooper has been appointed in the past. He's currently serving as the chair of the Capital Metro Board. His term is nearly up. Cap Metro staff reached out to us a couple of weeks ago and asked that we put this item on the agenda so that we can take action on Mr. Cooper's potential appointment. At this meeting, there wouldn't be a break in service, as it were. My understanding from visiting with Cap Metro staff is that they have visited with Mr. Cooper and he is willing to serve again. So with that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions.
Okay, Councilmember Kitchen, did you have a motion?
I move approval of this item. I'm proud to be able to move approval of reappointment to Mr. Wade Cooper to the Cap Metro Board.
Second,
Okay, who was the second?
Trevilian.
All right, Commissioner Trevilian. There's one individual that signed up to speak on this item. Is Ms. Joseph still on the line?
Yes, Madam Chair, I am.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Joseph. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you so much, and board members. I wanted to make a comment, but to contextualize my remarks, I'm going to rely on Commissioner Rudy Medier's remarks when he got the 2019 Rising Leadership Award. He basically said for you to understand viewpoints and goals and to also recognize when someone is telling you their viewpoint, that's their truth, that's the life they lived. And so I opposed the reappointment of Chairman Cooper because he's demonstrated an aversion to blacks. And what I mean by that specifically is that on January 28, 2019, he acknowledged the disparate impacts in Northeast Austin, but he has refused to analyze and implement the least discriminatory alternatives. 60 minutes is how long black people wait for the bus on the new route. It's 6 and 7 minutes to the University of Texas at Austin, 15 minutes in Northwest Austin. I want you to understand that what we consistently get are statistics related to ridership, but ridership and coverage are two different reasons that you have transportation. I want you to understand that a 3-mile walk to Samsung is 3 miles. Whether Councilmember Kitchen continues to write these resolutions that specify equity or equitable transportation, that doesn't make it so. And so we want someone who will listen to us. And for the legislative history, just so you have the context, in 2011, the legislature found that Capital Metro's board was tone deaf. And that is what we've gotten thus far, and it will not change. I want you to recognize that this is our reality. Black people can't get to the jobs in Northeast Austin because it takes too long. We can't get to the hospital because the service is eliminated. That is our truth and our reality. I'll give you a real example. Last Tuesday, I testified on the Pecan Springs. There's a silver shelter between MLK and 51st Street where there is literally no houses. But Capital Metro wants us to believe that they have complied with their publicly promulgated rules, regulations, and procedures. They have specified on paper what the guidelines are, but they have refused to comply with it. And it is the chairman that's leading the board this way. And so I would ask you to recognize the need for new leadership, someone who will actually look at Title VI and comply with the guidance from the Federal Transit Administration and Federal Highway Administration. He has been tone deaf. They had $6 million contingency, and they put it towards Project Connect. Follow the funds, you'll find the focus. $6 million, June 28, 2018, Project Connect from the city of Austin. They have refused to do anything for us other than to give us Rosa Parks stickers on the bus. They have refused to give our senior citizens equitable transportation. Instead, RVJ, which is Mr. Mitchell's project, they have 2 sets of buses over there. And so I'm just asking you, Madam Chair, to look at term limits. And I know Commissioner Doherty is a proponent of that.
Your time is up. All right. There is a motion by Councilmember Kitchen and a second by Commissioner Trevilian. Is there any discussion on this item? right, hearing none. Let me, because I think it'll be easier, let me go in the reverse. Is there anybody against the motion? Anybody against the motion? All right, then the motion passes unanimously on item number 7. Just as a reminder, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. Thank you. Okay, item number 8 is discuss and take appropriate action on amendments to the 2019-2022 TIP. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Madam.
Mayor Adler, I think you're not muted. If you wouldn't mute it, thank you. Somebody's having a snack. What'd you bring?
It is dinner time. So.
I was muted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll just go through this briefly. I know the meeting's running long, but this is the final amendment cycle to the 2019-2022 Transportation Improvement Program. One thing I want to be clear on, there are a lot of TIP-related actions that we've been going through over the past few months and again next month as well. So originally, this amendment cycle was running concurrent to the development and approval of the 21-24 Transportation Improvement Program, but we've kept this on schedule and delayed the adoption of the next Transportation Improvement Program so that we could deal with the I-35 Capital Express deferral maintain decision. So I want to just be clear that this amendment cycle is not going to impact those decisions that happen next month, and they're essentially unrelated. These amendments are only going to be involve this current Transportation Improvement Program. If you'll go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, so the current program is set to expire once the new program is adopted next month and then approved at the federal level. And I just want to reiterate again, these amendments will be reflected almost immediately in the 2019-2022 TIP. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So the overall process back in January, this is a regular process that we do. Like the plan, the Transportation Improvement Program is a living document that we amend on a regular basis. We do this in the fall and the spring to give sponsors the opportunity to make any changes they need to make to the current listings. It's imperative that the actual listings themselves remain up to date with the most current project information. And as we all know, projects change on a very consistent basis, whether it be costs or funding limits, things of that nature. Their sponsors put in those requests with us, and then we take them out to the public for community outreach and comment. We also take them to the Technical Advisory Committee as an information item, and then again for a recommendation, which they did this past month. They've recommended these amendments, and then of course we had a public hearing last month on the amendments, and here we are today asking for approval of these changes. And then once those are approved, we enter those amendments into the statewide system where it's wrapped up into the statewide Transportation Improvement Program, approved at the Texas Transportation Commission. And then our representatives at the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration will go in and individually approve each change to the projects. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So this is just a breakdown of the schedule I just went through. I just wanted y'all to have it in the send out, and I won't go through the actual dates, but this is just the dates of what I just described. If you'll go to the next slide. And so in your backup materials, you'll see the actual listings. This just includes the basic project information, such as the limits, the sponsors, the project costs and YOE. And then in the blue, you'll see the actual amendment requests, what's requested to be changed about those specific projects. One thing I do want to note is that you'll see some projects that are listed in there, and I don't want anybody to, there's some projects, ITS projects and the SH71 projects that are being amended in this current improvement program, but they're going to be part of the discussion next month in regards to the defer or maintain. But as of now, these are currently funded projects so because that decision hadn't been made, whether or not they're going to be deferred or not, we're going to make those request those changes and instill those changes in the current documentation so that it remains up to date with what and represents the current situation today, which that may change next month if they end up getting deferred. That'll be represented in the next iteration of the TIP, but not in this one. So I just want to be clear so there's not any confusion between this current document and program versus the one we're going to be taking action on next month. And so if you'll just go 2 slides, actually. And so that concludes my presentation. I'll be more than happy to take any questions about the amendments themselves. Most of them are pretty basic in nature. They are adding a few new entries. We had some projects that were approved for Category 9 TASA funding through TxDOT's grant program. A reminder that we do give out Category 9 funding for the urbanized area, but TxDOT awards funds for projects outside of the urbanized area. So the city of Granger, Dripping Springs, and I believe I'm not sure if San Marcos, there are a few other sponsors that are going to have projects listed in this current TIP and in this amendment cycle. But with that, we and the Technical Advisory Committee are recommending adoption of the amendments. And I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Before we get to questions, there are 2 people that signed up to speak on this agenda item. Ms. Kelly Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would point out that I also signed up to speak on item 8, and on item 9, and I was never called on to speak. So something happened there. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. I just want to point out that at the April 6th public hearing, there was one public hearing to cover 3 documents: the 2045 plan, the amendments to the current TIP, and then the 2021 to 2024 TIP. And I understand that latter document has action on that has been postponed till June, but still each speaker was given 3 minutes to talk about all 3 of those. And I request that in the future, the public hearing be bifurcated, similar to how it was today, where speakers can individually comment on the draft plan versus the TIP. I also just wanted to point out that online, the online open house still has the March 30th, 2020 version of this TIP amendment list, which has some obvious inaccuracies, such as a duplicated, like the same project appearing twice. And I know that there have been updated versions attached to subsequent TAC meetings and TPB meetings. So I would just ask to make sure that when a document is updated and the governing bodies are given a new version of a project list or plan, that it be ensured that the online public documents are also updated. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Joseph has also signed up to speak on this item. Ms. Joseph?
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Madam Chair, let me just preface by saying the reason you've heard from me so much today is because I attempted to send an email before 2:00 p.m., which I did last meeting. However, it didn't go to the generic email box. It went to Mr. Johnson specifically, so I was not permitted to speak. As it relates specifically to the Transportation Improvement Program, I have a technical question. On page 110 and page 221 of the document, it specifies the Samsung project from Samsung to Harris Branch. And on page 110, it specifies $21 million. And page 221, which is the last page of the document, it shows an amendment. The only change to that amendment, which is not in your backup materials, but it's in the plan, it shows that the fiscal year changed from 2020 to 2021. My comment specifically about that area is that there needs to be a sidewalk from Dessau and Palmer up to Samsung, so there's no pedestrian facilities, and I'm not sure what the process is. I'm deeply saddened but not surprised that Commissioner Trevelyan has turned a blind eye to our needs in this area, so I'm just asking if this is a TxDOT question. The other item on the spreadsheet that is of concern to me is Merrilltown. It's a $637,000 item, and it's on page 157 of the actual document. That's of concern because that's where our senior citizens walk a mile to Wells Branch because Capital Metro eliminated the bus. So I'm just a little concerned about what the process is and whether these items will be eliminated when you move forward on June 8th, 2020. As I could tell, this was initially going to be something that you considered elimination of, and so I would just ask the staff to transparently list the projects that will be eliminated to include the update, and if they could actually speak to why the project shows $21 million and now $23 million. If something changed, if that could be posted in the public domain so I can know who specifically to make additional comments to. And I thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Jess. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to adopt agenda item number 8.
Oakley moves.
Second, Jones.
Okay, there's a motion by Judge Oakley and a second by Commissioner Jones. Any discussion? All right, is there anyone against the motion? Is there anyone against the motion? All right, motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item number 11. There is no item number 10 today. Item number 11. Ashby, is there any update you have?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I'll ask Mr. Collins to speak to this in a minute. But staff has been working on scoring the unscored Category 7 projects that will be the subject of discussion and potential action on the June 8th board meeting. I think we received a submittal from everybody that had an unscored project on the Category 7 list, and we have started working with the consultant to start scoring those projects. And right now, we anticipate meeting the date that you set, Madam Chair, for May 20th.
Is there any questions of Ashby? Just to, Ashby, repeat that date again, because that's, I think that we established that as a special called meeting to go over.
Workshop for May 20th, Madam Chair. And then before I forget on this item, Commissioner Shea at the last meeting was asking to see the TDM application that Campo staff submitted. Commissioner Shea, that's completed. We're going to pull all of that information together, and I'll get that over to you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
If you could make sure that we send out a meeting invite for that special meeting, just so people get it on their calendar.
Yes, ma'am.
And then there is a TAC meeting on May 18th. And then our June policy board meeting will be on the 8th. And stay tuned as to whether we're still meeting in this fashion or not, but it's my assumption that we will for the June meeting. So with that, we will adjourn this meeting at 5:29 p.m. Thank you all for your participation and your patience today.
Thank y'all. Y'all be safe. God bless.